Phil Reed and Dimitri and Rahul Agnihotri. I think I covered everybody, and Parmeet Gupta. And warm welcome to all of you. And we are ready to start the session. So we have been looking at this space for the last couple of months, because this is a very good, when I visited a year ago, the district cooling system in Gift City in Gandhinagar, that's only DCS which is functional in the country. I have seen there a 10,000 ton our 10,000 ton hour chilled water cooling storage system. That's a very good energy storage backup for grid applications. So that is what actually captured our attention. And also thereafter we visited a couple of times there. We also conducted a webinar last year and in November, and published a white paper. So our idea is that if we are able to give electricity, water, gas, all this as a service against a monthly fee, the same way we should be able to give cooling also as a service against a monthly fee through insulated water pipes. Insulated pipes. This is being done in many cities, dozens of cities. Some of the use cases will be presented during this workshop, and this is a very important revenue opportunity for utilities, although it is a capex and a long-term return business. But we are advocating that utilities in India should look up at this seriously. If brownfield project as well as greenfield projects, many studies, preliminary studies have been done. It's time for us to actually implement one. If not possible in some of the brownfield cities, if it is not economically viable, we should at least all the smart cities, 100 smart cities program, or many of those new infrastructure which we are building, we should look at it seriously. We had written, ISGF had written to the Prime Minister office requesting that they should take the new parliament and the Center Vista project, the new government offices which we are building. Almost after a century, we are going to have a new parliament, and that building will have many modern technologies. We had also requested consider DCS as a solution for cooling all those new construction which is coming up. So which would be a showcase for state capitals and many other stakeholders to emulate. So I stop here. There are experts on the subject, many, and they will take the discussions forward. I would request Sudhir to Mr. R.P. Gupta could not come to other pressing commitments. So Mr. Abe Bakre will, I'll request him to make the inaugural address. And Sudhir, you can have a detailed introduction of Mr. Bakre and other speakers as they are called. Thank you.
Thank you, Raji sir, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I will share the screen with the profile of the speakers and our inaugural address, Mr. Abhay Bakre. So as this workshop on district cooling is a long session, so we have divided this workshop into two sessions. First session will be on policy regulations and implementation plan, and the second sessions will be on technology and business models. So starting with our special address, Mr. Abhay Bakre, Director General, Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Shri Abhay Bakre is a postgraduate in electrical engineering from IIT Kharagpur. As the Group A officer from Ministry of Railways, he has worked in several railway projects. He also worked under Joint Development Commissioner in the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises. He was Nodal Officer for National Manufacturing Competitive Program. As DG of Bureau of Energy Efficiency, he is currently Sherpa for Clean Energy Ministerial Platform of 26 government members. He represented Ministry of Power in G20 Energy Ministerial meetings at Argentina in 2018 and in Japan 2019. As DG, his priority is to initiate new policies and programs to facilitate climate change mitigation, energy transition in the country. Welcome to the workshop, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. Martin Scheffler, is the co-founder of Audible Consulting, who will be moderating the session on policy regulation and implementation plan for DCS. Martin is the co-founder of Audible Consulting, a unit of Audible Foundation. He is currently engaged in power sector reforms, research, policy advocacy for distributed renewable energy generation, and applied R&D for accelerated system integration of renewables and green technologies. Welcome to the workshop, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. Ajit Singh Gupta. He is the director with Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Ministry of Power, Government of India. In this role, he is responsible for international cooperation, demand-side management, financing of energy efficiency initiatives, planning and statistics. Apart from this, he is also responsible for coordinating with other ministries on technical matters. Welcome to the workshop, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. S.P. Garnaik, is the Executive Director, Energy Efficiency Services Limited. During his 26 plus years of professional career, Mr. Garnaik has served in government, bilateral and international organizations at various capacities in the field of energy policy, energy management, resource conservation. As director in BE, Ministry of Power, Government of India, during 2010 to 2013, he managed perform, achieve and trade the PAT scheme and standard leveling program of India. At present, he is leading many portfolios in ESL, handling project worth of 1,500 crores, and is also leading flagship annual conference Inspire and a prestigious Indo-Israel Industrial R&D program. Welcome to the workshop, sir. Our next speaker, Ms. Lakshmi Rao. She is the Senior Director of International District Energy Association, and where she serves in a technical role to support district energy and CHP initiatives, projects, education, development of tools, and outreach efforts in 2005. She has served as a key resource and project lead for several innovative energy and water infrastructure education and outreach efforts to campuses, cities, communities, and municipalities. She has over 30 years of experience at the MIT, serving in senior technical and project management roles aimed at technology adoption and deployment and community initiative focused in the energy sector. Welcome to the session, ma'am. Our next speaker, Dimitri Bojkalov, Senior Director of Global Business Development at Danfoss. He graduated from Moscow Power Engineering Institute as mechanical engineer specialized in industrial heating system. In 2000, he was employed by Danfoss in such departments. Since then, he took various professional and management positions with Danfoss till now. In 2011, he moved from Danfoss Russia to global position of business development in Danfoss, and by that his responsibility is spread on several locations in EU, Russia, China for various products such as mechatronic controllers and distributed substations. Welcome to the session, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. Sudhir Palla, who is currently the country head of the BREED, a UAE-based district cooling utility that provides sustainable cooling as a service to over 400 million square feet of real estate developments across the GCC. Having commented his stint at the BREED, leading the corporate finance function, he played a key role in completion of 1.7 billion USD balance sheet recapitalization plan in 2011. He has since then contributed to the business in a variety of roles, leading regional asset management and business development functions. Welcome to the session, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. Michael Jacobson. Michael Jacobson is the Executive Director of the Asia Pacific Urban Energy Association, an initiative of International Institute for Energy Conservation. Mr. Jacobson is a graduate civil engineer with a master's degree in HVAC from the Royal Institute of Technology, Sweden. He has more than 15 years of experience within energy management and energy engineering, specialist knowledge in planning of smart RE integrated urban energy systems and hydraulic steady state and transient state analysis of complex thermal energy systems. Welcome to the session, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. Rahul Agnihotri, has around 19 years of experience of working in energy sector. He is coordinating the District Energy Institute's initiative work in South Asia, and supporting UNEP's new work on cold chain and e-mobility in India. He joined UNEP from Ernst & Young India office, where he worked with Power Grid Utilities team in strategy and transaction advisory. Welcome to the session, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. Philippe Hamilton Reid, has extensive experience in developing low and zero carbon projects, leading teams in Latin America, Europe, and Middle East. He is currently the Global Business Development Manager of Tractable Engineering. Welcome to the session, sir. For the next session, for the Technology and Business Development, our chair, Mr. Rajiv Sharma, is currently the Vice President of GIFT City and is mainly responsible for DCS planning and operation in the GIFT City. And GIFT City is the first city in India to implement and operate this system. Welcome to the session, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. Peter Lindbergh, Head of Operations, Asia Pacific Urban Energy Association, is an energy engineer with 15 years of experience as team leader, project manager, technical manager, and system designer. He has wide international experience working on projects in Scandinavia, Europe and Asia. He has extensive experience in district heating, district cooling, energy efficiency, renewable energy, demand side management, and sustainable urban development. Welcome to the session, sir. He'll be moderating the session on technology and business development, business models. Sorry. Our next speaker, Mr. He is a principal energy specialist with Asian Development Bank. He was responsible for leading projects in China and Mongolia, such as district heating and cooling, energy efficiency, renewable energy-based power interconnection in Northeast Asia until 2019. He's currently serving for India, Bangladesh, Bhutan in power distribution subsector. Welcome to the session, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. Ganesh Das, he is the head of innovation and R&D of Tata Power Delhi Distribution Limited. He is a visiting scholar at MIT. MIT, an honorary fellow at the Center for Urban Energy in the Faculty of Engineering and Architecture Sciences, Ryerson University, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. He has a professional experience of 32 years in the area of technology management, collaborations, and partnership development, strategic planning, innovation management, consumer management, digital and business intelligence, corporate platform management, etc. He has done significant researches in the area of consumer behavior and strategy with papers written on the subject in international journals. Welcome to the session, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. Dheeraj Badwa, is currently the director of Career India. He has joined in Career 2005 and he has managed various responsibilities over the long tenure, which includes leading, growing, and consolidating HVAC businesses for the India region. He is currently responsible for commercial applied business in India region and the overseas business while engaging and collaborating with HVAC fraternity nodal agencies and stakeholders to encourage and promote energy efficient built environment. Welcome to the session, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. Shivashish Dev, who is the Director of Climate Policy of Shakti Foundation. He has more than 17 years of experience in advising government, multilateral, bilateral organizations and businesses in India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Mauritius, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, Jordan, and United Kingdom on projects related to energy efficiency, climate change, sectors such as industry appliances, transport, forestry, water, urban infrastructure, and buildings. Welcome to the session, sir. Next speaker, Mr. Jacob. Sorry for my pronunciation, I couldn't pronounce it properly. Mr. Jacob Yagard. He's the partner at DEFCO, an international business consulting and project development company within district heating and cooling. He's an experienced district energy consultant with master's degree in political science from the University of Aarhus, Denmark. He has more than 10 years of experience within district energy, specialist knowledge in business development and framework conditions for developing district energy projects. Welcome to the session, sir. Our next speaker, Mr. Pramit Gupta, he is the Business Development Associate in Tabreed. He is engaged in business market development of cooling as a service model through commercial scale district to campus cooling systems for Tabreed in India. Prior to Tabreed, Pramit worked on the investment into specialized real estate asset classes and planning and development and integrated industrial park. Welcome to the session, sir. With that, I finish the introduction of speakers. I will hand over my mic to Mr. Abhay Bakre, who is the Director General of Bureau of Energy Efficiency, for his special address. After that, Mr. Martin can take over as a moderator for the session on policy, regulations, and implementation. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Abhay Bakre. Hello, can you hear me? Bakre sir, you're on mute, sir. If okay, you can.
Thank you, Mr. Kundu. In fact, there was some connectivity issue, so I had to log in again. So thank you very much for inviting me here. So first of all, Mr. Pillai, Mr. Kundu, all esteemed panelists here, a very, very wide range of experience I could see from their profiles, and all the attendees, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed pleasure for me to actually tell you about what kind of opportunities we can have and kind of a direction for today's discussion. I'm sure it will be a very, very useful discussion. So first of all, let me thank ISGF and also the APUEA for getting this discussion on board on a very important topic today. When we are talking about the energy transition, we have various opportunities. And in this regard, this could be a very effective delivery system in terms of energy saving, energy efficiency, and even some kind of a reliable supply of energy. On one hand, let me talk about the benefits which broadly, which we have discussed in earlier cases also. We are basically going from a distributed kind of energy sources to a middle level of aggregation. It could be that when we replaced all unit AC into a centralized chilling system, now we are practically replacing it to and actually outsourcing it to a more efficient service provider. That is one way of doing it that can help us actually modernize our supply and the utilization, depending on the requirement, depending on the demand, depending on the time of the demand, everything can be utilized. And at the same time, the service provider who is actually supplying the energy, he can have his own manipulation, he can have his own automation to make sure that whatever energy is supplied is at the least cost to the consumers. At the same time, he can also upgrade his own technology. So these are many benefits. Technically, if we can say, operationally, if we find that yes, if we talk about the industry, and industry, as I think most of you are aware, more than 90% heat is supplied like a steam, and every industry or every big industry creating a boiler, installing a boiler, creating or steam for their own purpose, and again depending on their demand fluctuations, the big capacity boiler is idle, which is already at a inefficiency level much lower than as compared to any big power plant. We have a steam generation at a very lower efficient, and further if this steam is getting supplied through so many leakages, so much of inefficient distribution system, so the cost of steam or the cost of energy which at which the steam is used in that particular industry is definitely very high. Whereas if we come out with a centralized service provider who is supplying steam at the as per the demand only, just the way as Mr. Ajit initially told, just the way we get electricity, you switch on and you get the electricity, you switch on the tap and you get the water. If that manner, if we can get other forms of energy and through a centralized sources, it could be a localized central system, but may not be as big the way we operate the grid, the way we operate the water system. But it could be a colony based or even a township based. That would be much efficient option available. And that is one way of doing it. Maybe it will also dispense with every industry to basically keep away the operation maintenance staff of that particular buyer, keep on purchasing coal or any other kind of raw material to operate that boiler. It is also possible that for the cooling system, every time you have to keep a maintenance person or a maintenance contract to check those things, clean those things, and you have already a centralized system where they are maintained and operated by a highly skilled manpower. So in that way, it is a very big advantage for the users if we find a district kind of a energy supply system. In fact, when we talk about, we discussed this matter within BE also, that when we talk about the ESCO is actually energy service company. And although we have tried to make it popular, especially we are having two executives from ESL. The ESL, when set up as a super ESCO, the advantage was basically to have a energy performance contract, which could be by a kind of energy saving kind of thing. But we may actually expand it to the true meaning of ESCO, that is energy service company, where we are actually able to supply different kinds of energy depending on the requirement, depending on the quantity to the particular user at the time and at the rate he wants it, and at the most affordable or the most optimum cost. So that way, energy service as a business model is yet to fully evolve in most of the part of the world, and certainly in India. So this workshop, I believe, will actually head to that direction. How can we use energy as a service, cooling as a service, heating as a service, or any other form of energy, if we can think about, where the consumers can just get it as a plug-in kind of option available. The flip side, on the other side, is the challenges which we could is that, yes, who is going to invest it? Whether the investment will be sufficient. Just like our electricity EV charging infrastructure, where initial investment will be very high, you will have very few EVs or cars coming for that particular charging, and whether you will be in a position to get the return. On the other hand, the challenge will be, even if having invested that much money, whether the existing consumers, it's good for the new consumer, as Mr. Rajipalli rightly said about the parliament, new parliament building, or the central vista, which we are also trying to MOUD. But the existing consumers, they are already habitual of the local system, the unitary system. They can only think of changing their system when the life is over. Most of the system may have different time of life, so that's also difficult. How the other option is that how the existing building or the layouts or the townships can be retrofitted. The retrofitting itself will be a quite disturbance to the existing population. How are they going to actually merge it? The third thing could be what kind of business arrangement will be there, service level agreements will be there, whether there is a stoppage or whether there is a quality compromise. How are the consumers will getting compensated? And last but the most important is the reliability. In most of the cases, when we, even today we discuss about that such a reliable grid available all part of the country, but when we go to the industry consumer, they are still relying on the CPPs, to the extent that we already have almost 350 to 400 billion units of electricity being used within the industry sector, but which is generated by the CPPs within the plant premises. If that is the case, despite having a very reliable and automated grid across the country, why should the large industry depend on their own CPP just because of the reliability? So if the reliability is the issue in case of grid also, what could be the case? Suppose if I want to have, I'm having 4 air conditioners in my home, and maybe 1 or 2 only I'm using on a regular basis. The other 2 are the guest room, etc., which are very occasionally used. But what if on particular day the system goes into maintenance, whether there is a backup available, there is a standby available, or there is a kind of a shutdown? We always face shutdown on water side, we face shutdown on electricity side. But if those reliability issues are there and we don't get the AC, so that kind of apprehension will always be there in the minds of the consumers. So reliability, one issue, of course, and the cost. Once you switch over to a district cooling, tomorrow what if they are there is a contract period which ends and then next contract is renewed with a higher price? So consumer, it will be difficult to go back to their the original system of unitary equipment. So there are different options available. If there is a market competition, just like it is happening in telecom or many other sector, the users will be benefited. But initially, there will always be issues about the investment, the early movers, and also the lack of competition will actually get the compromise into the users. Finally, I also wanted to say that what kind of policies the different service providers do expect from the government side, or from regulatory point of view, or whether any voluntary basis where the BE can create some policies. Definitely, it is an energy efficiency proposition. It is one of the best option available to save energy. And in that case, I think the district cooling or district heating or any other kind of energy as a service model should be promoted. And BE is very keen to promote such initiatives through either guidelines or any other kind of handholding, maybe initial pilots also. BE is ready to do it. I have my director, Mr. Ajit, who will also be speaking in my later part of this seminar. But I'm sure that most of the panelists who are also familiar with the BE activities will be in a position to give you a better approach. In this regard, there will always be some kind of a debate. On one hand, we want power generation at a centralized place, which is more efficient, but then there are great issues. On the other hand, we have localized CPPs, which we want to eliminate. On the third front, we have big solar parks. Now we have 2,000 megawatt solar parks at one particular location coming into the grid. On the other hand, we are trying to promote rooftop solar PV to individual house. So there will always be a debate whether the centralized is good, or mid-level centralized is good, or whether the unitary is more unitary is better in terms of reliability or cost. So all these challenges will happen as a business case. There will be competition, there will be evolution of better models, better technologies, and maybe slowly the consumers will get more confidence. And finally, I'm sure that this alternative of energy efficiency improvement will always be in a good shape after a couple of years. I'm sure India stands for a big opportunity in the way we are moving ahead in energy efficiency field. We are always there to promote such initiatives. And there are many sectors where the district cooling or heating can be of quite use. And I'm sure the industry will also take it forward and support this particular business model. I welcome all the views, and I'm sure that you will be able to get a good discussion today. But nevertheless, I also invite all the panelists, if you can write to me directly for in a brief what kind of support or from BE or government you expect, and with a brief note, how would the district cooling or heating or energy as a service can be of accelerated deployment within this country. Once again, thank you ISGF for inviting me here, and I wish you all the best for today's fruitful discussion. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much for your kind words and all your valuable discussion. And I will request Mr. Martin to take over the virtual mic for this as a moderator to moderate this session on policy regulations and implementation. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So yeah, this is the first of 2 workshops on district cooling. And this session aims to learn from national and international experiences in regard to district cooling systems. Particular emphasis for this session is on enabling policy and regulatory environment and on innovative implementation models. And we have a very diverse and experienced lineup of industrial experts as speakers. A short reminder to the speakers, we have a 45 minutes session. Again, the focus is on policy and regulations and implementation models. You have about 6 minutes for your presentations, and please permit me to give you a warning, once you exceed your time limit. I also thought to give maybe 3 data points to frame this session on cooling as such. So if you look at India today, the majority of space cooling is run from coal-based electricity, and it uses environmentally harmful refrigerants. Yeah? And that contributes, of course, to local air pollution, ozone layer depletion, and climate change. A demand for 2030 estimates that the space cooling for building will grow by a factor of 11, so by 11 times. And lastly, by 2050, India is expected to be the largest consumer of space cooling in the world, with space cooling being responsible for approximately 28% of the electricity demand and 44% of the peak load. And then without any further ado, I would request Mr. Ajit Singh Gupta to start with his presentation. Mr. Singh Gupta?
Mr. Singh Gupta, you are on mute. Mr. Singh Gupta, you are on mute. Hi, Martin. I think he has logged out. There is some connectivity problem. We can go to the next speaker. Then when he again joins, then we can come back.
Mr. Garnaik, can I request you to make the start?
Thank you, Martin. Mr. Garnaik has stuck somewhere in the, I think, some prior engagement, so he's not able to hear. I am myself Girija Sankar. I am General Manager in ESL, and I will provide the DCS perspective from the ESL side. So as per your, I think the 6 minutes you have provided. So if you allow, I can share the screen and then just a minute. Is it visible?
It is visible, yes.
Yeah. So So I'm just coming to directly what are the, I think the initiatives have been taken so far. So we can divide the before 1970, after I think the inception or formulation of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. From 2000 to 2008, there are n number of initiatives taken by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. The establishment of the launching of the different program, the standard labeling program is one of the, I think, flagship program of the B. Later on, past 2008, there are NAPCC, the NMEEE, National Mission on Enhanced Energy Efficiency. Also, the pet industry and other initiatives has been initiated. So, regarding this DCS, they are the key drivers and key challenges. So we can see that these are also the challenges and these are also the opportunities. So the foremost is the cities accommodate nearly 31% of India's current population, and it contributes around 63% of the GDP. And it is likely to be increased at 40% by 2030. And in that time, the contribution of GDP will be 75%. Apart from, I think these two, challenge and opportunity, have the directly linkage with the DCS or District Energy System Initiative in India. There are the three missions under NAPCC, National Solar Mission, National Mission on Enhanced Energy Efficiency, also National Mission on Sustainable Habitat, where the Smart City Mission, Hriday, Amrit, these are the government of India's scheme, which directly or indirectly have the correlation with development of the DCS in the cities. There also the low carbon strategies has for the inclusive growth. It is one of the best report where they have highlighted what the strategies may be taken care for the meet out the cooling demand as per se for the cities. So as Dr. Ajit Bakre sir has already mentioned that the cooling and cooling as a service is one of the driver, and which once with the support of we it was regulated, then it will provide more opportunities. Apart from this, the third one is India's INDC. So where the India has voluntary declaration on the 20 to 25 reduction in emission intensity of GDP by 2020. It is on the basis of the 2005 level, and there are other the emission related targets. So emission reduction of 3.59 million ton of the CO2, emphasis on the sustainable development. So these are the key, I think, the documentation or national or international commitment where the India has directly relation where this DCS can be incorporated. Apart from this, I think one of the major is India Cooling Action Plan, where the targets, the medium term, short term and long term targets has been given. So by the India Cooling Action Plan, the reduce the cooling demand up to the 20 to 25% and refrigerant demand by 25 to 30% and reducing cooling energy requirement by 25 to 40%. These are the, I think, three key drivers which have the direct correlation with the development of the DCS. Because this DCS is based on the various multiple sources, and with the optimized operation, these are provide the reduction in the refrigerant demand, reduce the energy requirement per se for the cooling, and directly have the reduction in the cooling demand. Also, there is a one national adaptation fund for the climate change. It is around INR 3500 million fund exists, and they are providing various support to the different government entity as well as the other entities for mitigation and adaptation of the climate change. So with the support of the MOFCC and the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and also with the support of the UNEP, ESL has signed one SSFA, and under this SSFA, ESL has created one national project steering committee. It is co-chaired by the DGB and the Joint Secretary from MOFCC. And this is the project steering committee guide us, provide the interlinkage of the different scheme. So under this project steering committee, we have carried out with the support of the UNEP. The 7 cities are supported, 5 cities rapid assessment has been published. These are for the Bhopal, Coimbatore, Pune, Rajkot and Thane. The methodology and the tools are also being supported under this. And the Chennai, Surats are also, we are reaching out. We also recently in the last month, we have conducted one DCS workshop with the OECC. So OECC is Overseas Cooperation Center from the Japan, under the Ministry of Environment, Japan. So they are also bringing some, I think, innovative financing and other supports for these cities. And with the support of the UNEP, we are working the few prominent cities, and we are seeing that there may be some conceptualization and also the DPR preparation, also the documentation and some policy related incorporation in their bylaws maybe come out for the few cities. So Amravati, Hyderabad, Pharma City, Rajkot, Thane, these are the prominent cities we are targeting. And under this project steering committee, so ESL is the national coordinator. We are working with the different cities. But as per my personal experience, there are the 3 key stakeholders which should be addressed. And among these are the first one is the smart cities. I think the smart cities are the main key stakeholder which will own this project, which will facilitate the implementation, development, all these sort of the engagement for the DCS development in particular city. Another is the DISCOM, as DGB sir has told that if the DISCOM or some energy service company provides cooling as a service, then it will create the complete chain where the investment can be carried out, the business model can be tested out, and DISCOM being as a electric supply company, they can also work with the other ESCOs, the energy service companies. ESL will also want to part of those initiatives where the cooling and the energy or the power both can be collaborated. The third one is the service providers like the Tabri and other, the Aeroville, the consulting firm, the ISRE, Indian Society of Heating and Refrigeration, they are also ESL is also working with them. So by the engaging multiple stakeholders and creating the ecosystem is the way to develop the DCS system in the many cities of India. These are, I think, with the support of UNEP, we have conducted how many projects will be there. So we have.
Mr. Shankar, sorry to interrupt. The time is up. Could I request you to wrap up your session?
So I'm just closing here. So these are the, I think, the outcome of this study. Number of district cooling plants. If we see in the coming years, they may be around 118, and investment potential around 13.5 billion USD dollar, energy saving of 2964 gigawatt hours, and also the result in the CO2 reduction. So these are the on the 16th, with the support of the UNEP, we are publicizing these data, and these data may be useful for the smart cities and other cities to develop the DCS system. With these remarks, I am just conclude, and thanks to the organizer giving me opportunity, and our apology that Mr. Garnayak is not able to join that event. Thank you. It is over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar, for outlining, the initiatives and missions undertaken by the government of India for transition towards, a low carbon cooling future. Now, I would like to request Mr. Ajit Singh Gupta to come forward for his presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And of course, I don't have a formal presentation. And I think already Mr. Girija Shankar has deliberated a detailed presentation, which has kind of given the background, and also DGB has also spoken earlier. So the background and the context is already there, and the potential, as Mr. Girija Shankar has shown in his presentation, that is enormous potential for district cooling systems in India. Just to kind of draw a background, the energy consumption from space cooling in buildings, as you correctly mentioned, that it is going to be around 11 times by 2050. But maybe if we look at certainly a shorter time horizon, then by 2037, 38, that is in the next 2 decades, it's going to increase at around 4 times. That is the estimate we have as per the India Cooling Action Plan. So presently it is around 135 terawatt hours, and it is likely to increase to up to 585 terawatt hours. That is the kind of space cooling need that we can anticipate immediately in the say that decade or two, next decade or two. Now the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, of course, as we've been created and established under the Energy Conservation Act to promote the efficient use of energy and its consumption in the country. So to mitigate this rising cooling demand, we have come up with, of course, the standards and labeling program to reduce the active cooling demand of appliances, and which includes, of course, the appliances like air conditioners and refrigerators, which contribute largely towards the cooling demand of appliances. At the same time, we have also come up with these energy conservation building codes, both for commercial buildings in 2007, and then with the updated version in 2017. And now lately in 2019, we have also come up with a residential code. So all these building codes are aimed at reducing the passive cooling demand of the buildings. So the overall, how the mitigating strategies are now, of course, when we were preparing this India Cooling Action Plan, along with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, so district cooling system was also given its due importance. And in India, of course, because of this rising cooling demand, it is pertinent that we do address this problem of mitigating the cooling demand through DCS. And we have already seen in our previous presentations the potential and the kind of influence that DCS can have in order to mitigate the cooling demand. And of course, there are advantages associated with cooling demand, which I hope that other speakers will try and kind of capture. But maybe just to highlight, it reduces the capital cost of installing filters at the building level. Kind of frees up valuable rooftop and building space. So in this context, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development has started an initiative on advancing the agenda of energy efficient and environment friendly DCS. And one of the significant activities envisaged under this project is to, as DGB mentioned, is to demonstrate the district cooling system in a few pilot projects, so that we have sufficient data-backed evidence and also sufficient policies in place for formulation of suitable policies. So at this moment, we are we have initiated this project, and we are trying to see what all policies, what all mixture of policies can be suitable, whether it will be a fully private-owned policy that will be able to transform the market of DCS, or it will be a hybrid model wherein the public-private both will come into the picture, or it will be a public model. So of course, we are trying to find out the advantages and the disadvantages of each of these three models. And of course, this is something which we are currently trying to develop. And of course, we'll have a larger stakeholder consultation meetings with all the relevant stakeholders, the suppliers, the manufacturers, and also the think tanks, various think tanks who are already doing a kind of good job in the field of district cooling. So after we do all this kind of consultation, we'll try to come up with a policy as to how to implement this concept of district cooling systems by using cooling as a service, as was mentioned earlier as well. So that is the objective with which we are working. Similar to something like the rollout of PNG, for example, instead of this the LPG gas cylinders. It has already been rolled out in metro cities. So we'll try to see if similar models can be worked out in case of rolling out district cooling systems at a much larger scale. To end with, of course, we believe that the district cooling system can play a vital role in addressing the India's space cooling challenge against, of course, the international commitment as was again mentioned earlier, the NDC commitments that we have, it will again contribute to kind of achieving our NDC goals, or rather I would say overachieving our NDC goals. And at the same time, it will also contribute significantly to the India's commitment under the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol as well. So keeping all these things in mind, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency believes that DCS can play a crucial role in limiting the negative growth of space cooling in India. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, ISSGF, for the opportunity, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Singh Gupta, to outline the Bureau of Energy Efficiency efforts in mitigating cooling demand. And my takeaway is, of course, primarily through energy efficient DCS and through developing implementation models. Without any further ado, Ms. Lakshmi Rao, could I request you to give your presentation?
Thank you, Martin. I don't have slides as well, but I will try to be brief so I can cede my time to some others. So I'm here representing best practices from the United States. This country has the oldest district cooling system. They have been around for decades. Middle East has the largest. They started later, but they have far exceeded our capacity. And India has Gift City, 10,000 tons. So we're all in different stages of growth. But I do think, and I'm just thinking this as I'm talking, that India will be the hare and tortoise story, where I am so impressed with this workshop. I was just trying to think how many Indian government officials or people who represent energy efficiency in this country would be able to speak as informedly as Mr. Bakre did, or have the passion that Reji had for saying, the new parliament building should be on district cooling. I mean, the US Capitol, for example, is on district energy. It used to be a coal-based plant, and they used to see the coal smoke coming out till the speaker said, what is this? We're supposed to be going to renewable energy. So they had a massive transformation. So one of the disadvantages of having already a large district cooling infrastructure is it's hard to turn it. It's like turning a big ship. So I think India, with its climate cooling action plan and all of the workshops and all the information, I think will be better poised to do it right, do it at a larger scale. But at the same time, I'm a big proponent of the one trench policy. I come from a campus environment where we provide everything as a service to our buildings, our students and professors. We have power, which we generate. We have cooling, heating, compressed air, water. Everything goes through, we call it one trench. You dig once and you put everything. And also the internet, the Ethernet fiber. So I think that as cities, what is a smart city? It's not sensors only. The infrastructure should be smart, so that if you're going to develop a city, see if you can think about the one trench. We often see streets that are dug up. We dig it up for one thing, we dig it up again a few months later. So some of these very practical things, it's hard to do in India because of the way it's much more dense, But at the same time, any greenfield projects, any new developments, I can imagine that in 50 years, we'll have new cities in India. They may not be the Bombays of the world, but they will definitely be cities, excuse me, because of the population density we have. And so community scale thinking, Mr. Bakre said, what scale of aggregation will work? Definitely, we have to get away from unitary units, mostly. We can avoid it. It's not black or white. There will be places for solar rooftop installations or some unitary units. But where we can, if we can aggregate, there are so many benefits. You save space, you need less capacity because you have diversity. You can, be more efficient on the refrigerant front. You can control leakages better. But also when you aggregate, you can try different technologies. For example, in Paris, they use the water from the Seine as the heat sink, which you can't do at a building level. So when you have a bigger bigger project, you can try, larger geothermal fields and some of the newer technologies that will come through. We can better leverage that at a district or a community scale or a smart city scale, if you will. So, district cooling also provides some grid relief, especially if it's paired with thermal energy storage. We have a lot of wind power, we can make cooling and store it in a tank. We can also provide the environmental benefits, because in addition to efficiency, creating less carbon, we can do that. But in terms of policy, the US, unfortunately, there is no federal policy. Zilch, there is none. On many fronts, there is there are some state level policies, but none of them address district cooling. There are building codes and the ASHRAE energy efficiency code. So policy is very diffuse. There is no central government, state government. Where policy is available is at the local level. Cities have their planning zone, planning divisions, and they try to plan their cities. In the US, there's a lot of planning. You cannot just build a home or a building or a university without a lot of planning restrictions, the floor area ratios, setbacks from other buildings. So the planning folks have a lot of power. So that's who is trying to push district cooling and say, if you're building large scale developments of millions of square feet, you must consider district cooling. There is no mandate, it's a voluntary, but they give you a carrot, say we can have you have more parking spaces or taller buildings. So some small level of incentives are given. So planning is very important. By the time a city is designed and ready to go, it's too late to consider district cooling. It has to be thought about very early on. With electricity, we're very used to, well, we want power, just plug it in. It's there, it's already there. With cooling, especially in India, you have to think ahead and plan where the pockets of district cooling loads will be. And we don't have to start with the residential. There's very little residential cooling in the United States, practically non-existent, because that's the hard one. But if we, for example, in the Middle East, they started with the military bases, government buildings. In Colombia, they're doing, beach towns. So I think we need to move away from thinking that we're going to convert all the window units right away, especially given that they may have just been installed. But if we capture large sectors as the early adopters, the government buildings, pharmaceutical companies, other industries, hospital sector, educational sector. So I feel that India may want to focus on those sectors. Airports, I know I've been at Hyderabad airport and I think they considered district cooling but abandoned it. So I think that we're going to have more airports. Certainly all of the bases, let me think, data centers, where they can use their waste heat to maybe help a hotel next door. There are some small models coming up like that where you can have, a district doesn't have to be hundreds of buildings. It can be three large buildings sharing energy. So energy sharing models. So I want to leave with that because I'm sure there'll be time for questions, but I think India should carve its own journey. While you can look at the United States, I think just from watching you and hearing you, you have the ability to drive this bus and fly this plane. I'm very optimistic. So thank you, Martin. I hope I haven't exceeded my time.
Thanks, Ms. Rao, for emphasizing. My takeaways, one is the emphasis on smart infrastructure with the one trench policy, community scale thinking and planning. And also thanks for emphasizing some of the leverage points that district cooling systems have as compared to other cooling technologies. Mr. Dimitri Bojkalov, can I please invite you?
Yeah, hi everyone, and first of all, thank you very much, for this opportunity to be here today with you, and virtually, we all get used to this, virtually to be, in different places, but to stay honest, what I want to say, as most of you know, the Danfoss is one of the global and the leading companies in energy efficiency for decades. We are looking for different projects, and working within a variety of industries. We have a global presence also for sure in India, you know, for the years and for the case again, you know. And actually, usually from the such of the representatives like me, you know, on the such of the conferences, the people are expecting some sort of the discussion on the presentation about the products, solutions which you might have. And I would like to be slightly destroy these, you know, expectations. I'm not going to talk about the products, and I'm not going to talk about the solutions which we have for sure we have for district cooling, you know, and for district energy in general. Rather, I would like to speak about a bit of the and use this opportunity to speak about more the trends which we see on the market in general, as on district energy, as in a particular district cooling across the different countries. And you know that we, as I mentioned, you know, we are a global company. We are quite we have a leading the positions in the different countries: Europe, Russia, China. We are working in the Middle East. We are working in Asia Pacific, North America, and I can say that, you know, that everywhere we see the one and the standard one mega trends, which is okay. And this year also get, you know, one more, you know, dimension on this one, this pandemic one. But in general, we see that there is a 5 mega trends, and I would mention only 4 of them because the food one is not the thing which we would like to discuss today. But I would speak about more like 4 of them. The first one is the digitalization, which we clearly see, and here, and I don't need to speak anything, you know, you probably know it better than me. India is known as the hub, you know, for the digital and IT services. You know, you're providing them the huge amount of them is the data centers, and a lot of the other things are in there. But what is we need to take into account that even before the pandemic, which is for sure, you know, how to accelerate the growth, and the most of us probably lately, at least for me, I'm faced in a situation that there is, you know, the lack of the products on the market, like, you know, the digital products. For instance, laptop, I just ordered a new one 1 month ago, and I will get it in July from the Hewlett Packard. You know, so, you know, it's a bit of the rush on this, you know, the increasing of the digital solutions and utilizing digital products, you know, overall. That's even before the pandemics, the growth been 1 million devices connected to the internet per day, new devices globally, in the worldwide, you know. So it is, you know, rapidly growing. That leads to the next one, which is electrification. We can see that more and more devices globally on the world, you know, are connected to electrical power, are consuming the electrical power. That means, you know, that will have soon, until we will start to develop the new renewable sources of the energy, or we'll start to develop the more plants, you know, electrical plants, we will face within a shortage of the electrical energy in globally. And we also see in this one already, for instance, last year or 2 years ago in Sweden, they have quite some issues within the availability of electrical power, you know. Sweden, which is the, you know, developed market, you know, overall. It's also linked for sure to another mega trend which we see is urbanization. Urbanization, or not to me to speak, you know, I need to know that very well, how rapidly the populations in the cities are growing, you know. This is again, you know, the leading to the demand of the providing the comfort solutions, and we're speaking about the cooling. And then the last one is the climate change, which we all over the sea, you know, is the decarbonization. All of those things are interlinked together and directly linked to the district cooling systems or the district energy systems. Because whatever we do, we always face the shortages on the available resources. You know, if we will speak about the space cooling and adjust the standard, you know, these split systems, which is the majority of the people use, you know, or the just standalone chillers, it will always consume the significant amount of the energy. And if you would not integrate it into some wide of the network, you know, it will be always not so efficient as it might be. You know, the buildings have a different pattern of the consumptions. It might be the commercial building, it might be the shopping mall, it might be the hospital, even the residential buildings. In fact, you know, these buildings have a different, you know, the pattern of the consumption, and you need to take this into account, you know, and you can spread and share these resources across the different users. So the district cooling is the most effective solution, which is give you ability, you know, as not only reduce the energy consumption by the significant amount of the roughly around 50% you can reduce by utilizing the district cooling systems. But in fact, you can plan and properly predict the consumption, and based on this one, develop the further sources around it. And then, you know, a bit shortly speak about district energy and the project's realization. You know, India for sure not alone in this challenge. If you would look, you know, globally right now in Europe, there is a significant trend going towards the increasing the coverage of the by district energy systems to the different cities, even those one we've been previously working on a different sources of the energy. For instance, like in Holland, they just totally forbid to connect to anything else but a district energy. And one of the main reasons it's energy efficient, it's decarbonizing as the most sufficient and the best enough for the country, for the consumers. However, in all of these projects, you need to somehow combine the different powers in to realize them. First of all, it's for sure need to be the governmental policy, or the governmental should somehow provide additional financial instruments, like it's done, for instance, in Denmark or in some other countries, when is this, the specific funds or the subsidies are coming from the government in order to implement energy efficiency solutions, or at least they're investing in some external funds. I know my time is up, but I will try to summarize right now. Sorry. Then it's if you would look on, for instance, in the Middle East, in Dubai, wherever is any building, for instance, in Dubai, must be connected to district cooling systems. And this is also coming from the governmental level. And one of the main reasons for them, they would see this one as the most energy efficient solution, the decarbonizing solution, and they give them ability to deal with the shortage on the electricity. The same story goes for the Asia Pacific, whereas they exponentially grow the amount of the district cooling systems. It's also first of all, the willingness from the government, from the cities, but which will be for sure supported by the financial institutes, and for sure supported by such with the big players, like for instance the colleagues which is here from the TABRID or from the ENGIE. Just the short recap, 7 minutes, I can speak for the several hours, but yeah.
Thanks, Dimitri, for that, for outlining the 4 megatrends that you have identified, how you think this links to district cooling, and also highlighting the efficiency gains. And I think you gave a perfect handing over to Sudhir when you mentioned Dubai and of course other case studies. Sudhir, can you please come forward?
Yep. Hi everyone. Morning, good afternoon. I don't think it applies to Lakshmi because it's a very weird hour for her, but yeah. Otherwise, yeah. So I think Lakshmi, like you mentioned, right? Whilst the United States, the district energy systems there have been there for a very, very long time. The Middle East started much later, and now it is one of the largest in the world. And TABRID, as such, has been the pioneer in the GCC, starting off with the military, and then thereafter going to, of course, commercial development and specific pockets where it made sense. Now the thing is, initially, even in the GCC, if you see, district cooling wasn't necessarily regulated. It was mostly business-driven, industry-driven, right? And so that ended up in, whilst the industry growing quite well, and a lot of mistakes also being made along the way. So about 10 years ago, when, of course, when there was pre-2007, when because of financial crisis, there were a lot of issues that the district cooling companies faced in the GCC, including TABRID as well, which is when there was actually that increasing need, coupled with the conversation on energy efficiency and regulation, to start looking at how and what role the government can play. So what I'll do is I'll just share a few slides of some of the work we did back then with the various countries that we're working in, basically, one second, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, to kind of start building the case. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Let me just a few slides. Yeah, to essentially start, we realized that, for the market to grow and become larger, given that district cooling still was only contributing to about 10 to 15% of the overall cooling demand, we saw that there was the need, as a private player, the need for some form of regulation being in place, right? So to start building the dialogue and building the momentum around looking at regulation and what kind of policy can be there, we started working with the RSB in Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Saudi and so on and so forth. And essentially the way some of these countries looked at the current regulation that is there right now is basically following this kind of an approach. Is there potential? Is it beneficial? And so in the case of India, is it beneficial or not? And then are there structural issues right now that are hindering growth? And if yes, is intervention through some regulatory form good or not, right? Now, if you look at this in the context of India, it's quite clear. Like we've all seen, cooling demand is growing, even if the focus is just on the commercial space and not the residential, like you mentioned, Lakshmi as well. Basically, it is large enough to basically say, yes, something needs to be there. And of course, India is complex. We've been here for the last 3 years, and we see how difficult it is to have some kind of regulation. But at least, there is, from a market standpoint, there is then I would say that there is the rationale for having some kind of policy intervention. Would it be beneficial? We've spoken enough of it, so I won't go into that. I think it helps in many, many ways by having an integrated approach. Are there structural issues? I think Mr. Bakre covered extremely well. Whether it is basically how currently planning is done at a city level, or how real estate projects are being done, or how and what from a private sector standpoint for pre-investment risk to be, essentially covered in a risk-adjusted way, or even the counterparty risk and so on. There are a lot of structural issues that, unless if they're addressed, you probably would not be able to see something like this take off. And what kind of strategic interventions could be possible to kind of have a more kind of a policy environment for DC, right? So this is how it was first looked at overall, just simple in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Taking this, I think, then the next step was basically trying to see what are the levers or the frameworks that could potentially be followed. And I think, given where India is right now, and if this was to be done, the question always is, do you wait for a few pilots and then look at this, or at least have something in place to kind of enable the market to grow in a healthy way, to avoid mistakes made in other countries, right? So 6 broad levers, drawing in knowledge from all the other sectors, including gas, electricity, and so on whether, and depending upon the level of intervention, right? Basically just being a rule setter, going a step further where the city itself, through the single trench policy, invest in the networks like what Rajkot is trying to do right now, go one step further to be a single buyer network and so on. Now, of course, in the context of the GCC, given that there was already a lot of capacity in place and the industry was getting mature till, it was there for about 10 plus years, some of the other models could be considered. But here, we are still at a very early stage. So, probably, a rule setter option could be the easiest to implement. And what this would essentially do is basically, take care of most, take care of most of the issues and the risks that that have been highlighted already, in possibly trying to build a more robust district energy/district cooling market in India. And basically the issues that we know are the aspect of demand risk, like Mr. Bakre mentioned, who would be the first off-takers till such time the off-takers come, who bears the pre-investment risk. Second is basically the pre-investment, payment and counterparty. Consumer protection is required, and that is an issue that is becoming more and more important in the GCC, where basically, since district cooling entities are monopolistic in nature, what kind of consumer protection could, both in terms of price and tariff regulation, that can come into place, including rights that the consumers have, and the codes and standards building upon what is currently already there in the country, right? So a lot of these can be addressed just with just the regulatory framework one, as we called it then, of being a rule setter, of purely trying to say wherever it makes sense, wherever, for new green large developments, can there be some kind of a rule that could be in place to kind of promote planning moving in this direction, right? To kind of enhance the ability for district cooling to work. And the reason why that alone would be enough is because at this point, unlike say renewables like solar, etc., which required a lot of subsidies till they got to grid parity, here's a case where you basically, of course, the issue is planning, but here's a case where you have both cost savings and environmental gains right from day one if planned well, right? So it's just about creating the right enabling environment. And the way, given how things work in India, I think, whilst in the US, in America, like you said, where basically cities take the lead, here it's always a chicken and egg. Some cities are taking the lead, but at the same time, the building blocks could possibly be some kind of a national policy in general, building on what BE is doing through labeling and standards and so on, and then devolving authority to respective cities, either through the smart cities mission or through the urban local bodies, and then of course the whole ecosystem that is currently in play, including what PSL is doing on supporting cities do energy mapping, viability studies, etc., could kind of then flow through a more structured approach. And some issues that we as the breed in the last year plus have been seeing in India is basically for new greenfield projects where this is not considered as a public utility, and then it creates issues around access and land. So depending upon case by case, I think also considering the possibility of this being looked at as public utility, given the kind of overall benefits and the scale it can go to. And the next step could be like how you have for multiple utilities and infrastructure sectors in India, including airports, what kind of tariff regulation could be in place. So I think, unless all of these come together, it may not necessarily take off in a holistic, healthy, and in a rapid way in India. Otherwise, it would just be individual developer-led like us or ESL and or discoms and the likes, and in specific pockets with certain cities who probably are more progressive in terms of looking at how they can approach planning, at least for new greenfield areas. But I mean, it is still good. It still basically would make an impact for sure. But to really capitalize on the opportunity that we are at right now as a country, and the inflection point that we are at in terms of cooling demand growth over the next 20 years, some kind of overall holistic approach, keeping all these aspects in mind, with rules being set at the center, and then that being devolved down through like how ECBC, etc. has been done to the respective cities and states, probably might help in essentially creating that playing field, the level playing field that is required for what is already viable and sustainable to kind of take off in a more progressive, rapid way. Right, so that's it. And I think, I mean, as a part of the work we did then with Abu Dhabi and Dubai, I think, I mean, I can share these slides as well. But we did a lot of benchmarking of basically all the regulatory models that are there back then in various parts of the world, whether it's in Singapore, whether it's in Scandinavian countries, looking at the power watt example in the GCC itself, the district cooling sector in Singapore, which is quite well regulated, and so on, to kind of draw benchmarks to see what can be picked up from each of these and how this could be looked at in a practical way that can be implemented. So following this, I think now there is a regulation in place in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi to kind of help promote district cooling. It's still more of a rule setter kind of a role that they play, where it's about trying to make sure that new large urban master plans, it's almost like mandatory to consider a district cooling. In Dubai, it's mandatory. In Abu Dhabi, it's more of a process-driven approch, and so on, right? So these are my slides. I won't basically take more time. You can always go into the question answers later. Oh, it's time up. Okay.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I was just going to give you a warning. Thanks for highlighting the role the government can play as a rule setter, as you said, in to accelerate district cooling. I am very conscious of time, so I would like to just proceed to the next speaker, Michael Jacobson. Please come forward.
Oh, thank you very much. I will just speak briefly. So I'm the Executive Director, as introduced, for the Asia Pacific Urban Energy Association. We are a regional sector association focusing on mainly district energy, district heating, district cooling, and multi-energy systems. So we are promoting simply the development of district cooling, which is the topic for today. We are acting as a bridge, typically between cities or developers and our members. So that is how we are positioning ourselves among all these stakeholders in the sector. One of our most important tasks is to increase awareness about district cooling specifically. And I think we have to highlight some different aspects of district cooling. We have heard a lot today about different benefits. Often we talk about the benefits that are related to scale advantages. But also, like you said, Martin, in the introduction here, I think that see district cooling as a not-in-kind solution for HFC phase-out is very important also, not least when we're talking about the NDCs and SDGs that government bodies have to relate to. So also that, like Reggie started to say in the beginning, that see district cooling as an important integrated part of electricity systems as well, allowing flexibility in the electricity grid and so on. There is a lot to learn from the region. We have heard a lot of international experiences also in the region. There is a lot to learn around. We have carried out many district cooling market studies in the region, and there are a lot of good things to learn, but also a lot of pitfalls to avoid, let's say. There is a lot of good example of not very successful district cooling projects as well. If we look around, just to mention a few markets here, I think is interesting. I mean, China is a huge district cooling market, often forgotten, not least due to the definition of district cooling. Like Lakshmi said before, I mean, district cooling could be just a few buildings that are connected as long as we get scale advantages, right? Then it would be, in our opinion, defined as district cooling. If we look at Singapore, for example, obviously it's a very mature market where there is a district cooling act in place, which obviously have helped a lot with the development there. In China, that is not the case, even though it's a big market. However, there is a tradition for urban planning. And this is very important. And here again, when it comes to our task as a sector association, is to support cities to actually include some aspects that would benefit the development of district cooling into urban planning. It's really, really important. If we look at, for example, Malaysia, actually the district cooling market is very huge to the size of the country. Here, there are no district cooling acts, and only recently cities have been looking into developing public district cooling. And here I think it's important to differentiate between public district cooling and private district cooling. Like we heard many here today, there are different kind of projects when we talk about private district cooling. There could be airports, commercial clusters, data centers, hospitals, hotel clusters. I mean, a lot of different kind of developments that could benefit of district cooling. And that is exactly what happened in Malaysia. That was what has actually grown the market from the beginning, to show that it is feasible, show that it is possible. And now cities are hooking up and trying to follow these great examples in Malaysia. We have heard some, of course, I agree that there are concerns when it comes to investments, with the front-loaded investments and so on. However, I would like to just point out some of our collaboration partners that are here today. I'm sure that Sudhir Palla from Tabreed will be happy to support with developing projects and overcome these kind of financial barriers, as well as Asian Development Bank that we have here today participating. So, I mean, if that is a real challenge, I think there are many who are willing to help overcome these barriers. Another reach out I would like to do, so for APUEA, we have also just established a district cooling focus group. So our members are having a group that specifically only focus on district cooling development. And anyone who is interested in that specifically, please reach out to Mr. Bjerregaard, who is on the speech here today, from DevCo, who is heading the group, or me, myself, or Peter Lundberg, who will host the other workshop here, or the panel. So I think that is all for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Michael, for also keeping it very short. So no, thanks for basically emphasizing once more, you know, basically the grid management services that could also be provided by district cooling systems, and for the references that you gave to Southeast Asia and China, and also to challenge the definition of district cooling itself. Having said that, can I please request Rahul to come forward? Rahul, are you here?
Yep. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the panelists, distinguished moderator, Martin, and all the participants joining from the different countries. I'm Rahul Agniyatri. I'm representing UNEP India office, and we have been working closely on cooling sector as a whole in India from last couple of years, and working closely with ministries like Ministry of Power, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and we have been working closely with ESL in promoting district cooling in India. So we have this two initiatives. One is District Energy in Cities initiative, and the other one is the Cool Coalition. So we have been working with municipal corporations in training and capacity building on urban cooling, district cooling. We have been supporting them in developing the feasibility studies and technical studies. We also have been providing them the support on developing the methodologies for cooling demand assessment, energy mapping, and this has been going on from a couple of years. What I feel now is the time has come in India to not only look at district cooling, but as a cooling as a whole from the context of the urban heat management. So when I say cooling as a whole, it means developing urban cooling plans for municipal corporation. And it should be a step-by-step process wherein we first focus on the natural cooling aspects, nature-based cooling. Then we focus on the implementation of building codes, like the energy conservation building codes that we are promoting in different states and in different cities through Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Then once the building are efficient, then we talk about district cooling. So when that makes sense because it reduces the overall energy cost for the building. It also reduces the use of refrigerant, and it reduces the water consumption as well. So going by this priority, I think this urban cooling plan, which we are now trying to develop with Rajkot city, is something which we really think that will bring in the whole perspective of cooling under one umbrella. And like Sudhir and various previous speakers discussed, particularly Lakshmi and Sudhir and Ajit from BE, everyone discussed about the different policies, regulatory mechanisms, and the implementation arrangements that are required for district cooling. I feel that in terms of policies, like Michael said, there are private district cooling projects and there are public district cooling projects. Public means promoted by municipal corporations. So I think it is easier to promote the private sector district cooling projects if there are some modifications done in a few of the local municipal corporations plans. Means like there are these development plans which are being prepared by the town planning department for every city. So if in development plan we incorporate or integrate, like we have integrated ACBC in development plans for cities, we can similarly integrate district cooling as one of the area under this plan, and we can make it compulsory for all consumers in the new area development to get connected to district cooling. And also we can ensure that whatever large projects or township projects that come up in the new areas, they strictly connect to the district cooling project. So district cooling project is considered in planning at design stage for large projects. So these are the couple of things which at municipal level can be promoted under district, under the urban planning. At state level and national level, I think the policies should more focus on like developing the tariff policy for district cooling projects. That could be one of the area. Then developing the technical codes and the standards for district cooling projects, like right of way, the piping design, then minimum performance standards for district cooling projects, then the quality of the district cooling project, giving a level playing field for the private sector as well as the municipal corporation in order to ensure that the risks are minimized into the project at the design stage. Then bringing in the financial mechanisms and the subsidies and some kind of incentives like a property tax or greater FSI into picture. So all these things are very, very essential if we want to promote district cooling projects in India. And we have worked closely with around 45 partners across the world under this District Energy in Cities initiative. And we have supported ESL in developing the study for the potential assessment of district cooling in India. And this study will be launched in third week of March. So it covers not only the potential of district cooling in different cities in India, but it also covers in depth what are the different jigs and pieces required in order to make district cooling implementable in different cities. So I think this report covers all the recommendations which Sudhir and previous speakers mentioned earlier, and all of these speakers and maybe many of the participants will also be the part of preparing this report. And I think this report is a very comprehensive report. It took around 8 months to 10 months for us to prepare, and it will definitely give a boost to the district cooling activities in India. But again, I would like to emphasize here is if we want to address that greater problem of cooling, district cooling is not the only solution. We will have to look at various other cooling solutions, and we need to bring in them to the city level. And this will require a lot of training and capacity building of the city level people, especially the town planning department, the building department, the electrical department, and the urban development department at state level and at national level, organizations like BESL. So I think the journey is not yet end, but it has started with this national study of potential for district cooling. And there is a lot of scope in cooling sector, and definitely in India, UNEP would be very much willing to support all the national government, the private players, the academicians, and bring them all together and would try to solve this problem of urban heating and try to bring in the sustainable solutions for cooling. With this, I would like to end my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. I really appreciate that you reminded us about the importance of energy efficiency, conservation at the building level as a first step. And I also took away that you indicated some of the roles the government could play in creating a level playing field for all the private parties. We have one more speaker to go, Mr. Philippe Hamilton Reid. Could you please come forward?
Yes, good morning to everybody. And there's been some very impressive speakers so far. Thank you very much for the ISGF and also the APUEA to give us this platform this morning. And I'm going to very quickly share my screen with you to share the experiences we've had so far in this very interesting journey, working across different continents in the area of district heating and cooling systems. Can you see my screen okay?
Not yet.
Just try again.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to go on to slideshow. So, can you still see me okay?
Yeah.
Good, thanks. Okay, so Tractable is a global engineering consultancy, and we work with the likes of Tabreed and our parent company, Engie, in the transition towards carbon neutral district heating and cooling systems. And what I'd like to do today is probably share some of the experiences we've had working in this area. So what are the points of why do we have DHC, and what is our the reason behind why we think this is a market with huge potential globally? And some of these have been mentioned today already, but decentralization is obviously a big one. Decentralization is almost like the democratization of heating and cooling, whereby regionally and at campus level or at municipal level, we have the ability to be able to determine our destiny in terms of how we actually provide heating and cooling as a service, and also power where applicable as well. It also allows us to de-stress the grid. That could be the gas grid, it could be the power grid, but it allows us it allows much more participation in joint public-private type partnerships, as opposed to large expenditure by governments in infrastructure. Decarbonisation has been mentioned also quite a lot, and the district heating and cooling schemes provide an ideal route to plan long-term strategy to enable zero carbon or carbon neutrality. The implementation of digitalization and as artificial intelligence becomes more and more developed, the ability to control, to monitor, to improve the performance, accumulating all the data, both in terms of power consumption or heating and cooling consumption, as well as heating and cooling generation. The systems are normally long life, so they're at least 25, 30 years in terms of useful life. And the great thing about these systems is the ability to evolve, to incorporate new technologies, to take off old technologies as they become redundant, and also to allow for climate change. And we're finding at the moment we can model some areas in the world which are strictly within the district heating bracket at the moment, which because of global warming will start to require cooling in the next 10 or 20 years. So the ability to have a district heating and cooling system that can do that will allow for the climate change. The capturing of waste heat, which I'll come across in a bit later, and also exploitation of energy storage, which some of our speakers have been mentioning already. So the planning and prioritizing is very important. And the previous speaker mentioned demand reduction. So the first thing is to reduce the annual consumption and to reduce the peaks in terms of your energy consumers. And that really has to be the first step in terms of the planning of the sizing. Coupling of different systems together, so coupling of residential, industrial, commercial sites to be able to have a balance, to have a sort of pool of cooling or pool of heating as required, depending on the ambient conditions, and waste heat recovery as well, which I'll come on to a bit later. Energy storage, I mentioned already, the implementation of low zero carbon energy. And of course, the next step after that is carbon capture and offset. And it's really important that all the different phases of the project are joined up together, from feasibility and planning to good modeling, looking at different scenarios in terms of life cycle costs, different types of plant, different temperatures of system, the implementation of the design, delivery of the project, and of course the commissioning and handover, and very importantly, the operational benchmarking after handover. So looking at, first of all, energy consumption, the peak reduction, it really needs to be done at a building by building level. If it's a greenfield site, it's much easier because you can design and specify the performance of those buildings in terms of the energy profiles, in terms of how much heating or cooling is consumed. The electrical profiling, building model, bioclimatic design, so passive energy efficiency of those buildings, the ability to use microgrids, electrical distribution, if the national regulations permit, and infrastructure load modeling, and obviously the MEP design, the engineering services that go within those efficient buildings. Waste heat recuperation I've already discussed, and this is something we're rolling out much more now. The latest 5G type of district heating and cooling schemes enables us to take heating from low-grade heat from some nuclear facilities, latest generation nuclear, from cold storage, logistics type buildings with a lot of refrigeration, from industrial processes, data centers, which have been mentioned already, and obviously from anaerobic digestion and any sort of heat from incineration or waste disposal. And that heat can obviously be used in the takers, such as healthcare, residential, offices, hotels, and retail. We've gone from this journey from 100 degrees plus superheated steam type systems, which are the 1950 systems, which you still find in some parts of Europe. And we're now going all the way down now through the different systems. We're looking at the low temperature systems operating typically at 25, 30 degrees, using heat pump technology to be able to boost the heat from 30 degrees up to 60 or 70, whichever is required in those buildings. And if I was a heat pump manufacturer right now, I'd be very happy because there's a huge market for heat pumps taking low-grade heat from the networks and delivering the right temperature to those buildings. The heating and cooling schemes, we have the ability to unplug old renewable energy technologies and insert new technologies. So for example, biomass is already well ensconced. Geothermal is being used quite extensively. We're working in France with ENGIE on geothermal type systems. But in the future, obviously, hydrogen, especially green hydrogen, will come to the fore and therefore will become more and more mature in terms of market value. Thermal storage is spoken about, and again, it's whatever you have nearby. So one of the speakers mentioned previously taking water from nearby lakes or the sea, and we have mine storage as well, thermal water storage. There's a lot of research going on with phase change materials at the moment. The ability to use green hydrogen both in terms of heat storage and also for electrical storage using fuel cells. And very much a mature market in certain parts of the world, such as Holland, is the ability to store energy below ground on a long-term basis. So the use of cold and warm reservoirs, again, using heat pumps to be able to store across the year thermal energy, albeit at very, very small differentials in temperature, but at the same time to be able to make a very, very big difference in terms of how efficient the systems operate at. And finally, adding power. Is my time up? Thank you very much. And just adding microgrids to the mix, the ability for combined heat and power, and the ability to operate our own microgrids. So thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry I've had to cram quite a lot into a short space of time, but it's a big subject and there's a lot of technology in that.
Thank you, Philip, for that. So my takeaway is, of course, I appreciated your focus on the technologies, some of them emerging, some of them existing, and the emphasis on coupling. So I have now the challenge to sum up this session, and a lot of it has been covered. So my key takeaway is the following. So while India has taken definitely significant steps in accelerating district cooling, we also have heard that significant challenges are remaining. And we had a variety of challenges, some of them related to policies and regulations, some of them to implementations, and some of them are also more of a technology nature. But some of the key challenges that I have heard when we talk about policy and regulations in these sessions are related to building codes, labeling standards, price regulations and interface with the electricity utility, land use and access to land, and planning and aggregation. Unfortunately, we will not have time for a discussion. We are about 15 minutes over our allocated time. And I think then we would close the session and I would hand over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Martin. And we'll have the discussion at the end, and we can stretch a bit at the end after this session is over on the technology and business models. So for this session, I will hand over this. I'll hand over this virtual mic to Mr. Peter Lindbergh from Upwork. Mr. Peter, you can go ahead, please. Am I audible?
Hello?
Yeah, you're audible. You are audible, please.
Yes, thank you. Yes, hello, my name is Peter Lindbergh and I'm the head of operation for the Asia Pacific Urban Energy Association. And I will be the moderator for session 2 here with focus on technology and business models. We are running a bit short on time. And so I think we will go ahead as soon as possible here with the speakers. I would introduce each speaker briefly, basically. And for the speakers, let me know if you have a presentation or if you want to discuss directly. First, I would like to give the word to Mr. Rajiv Sharma, who is the Vice President of Gift City. And so can you explain a little bit how district cooling systems play a vital role in the India cooling market, and also how on your views on the business models for district cooling in India?
Mr. Sharma, please, if you can.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity here. Thank you, Peter, for bringing me in here. I think the main subject that I was supposed to be focusing here is the technology and some business model. So in Gujarat, we have a 10,000 ton district cooling system, which has to be expanded up to 140,000 ton over a period of some 10 to 15 years. And we are operating currently a 10,000 ton system. And more than bringing to the table, I am also very fascinated to see what we have that we can use in our existing plant. So if you allow me to use my slides, so I can continue quickly. So just give me a minute.
If you want me to share, I can share your slides. It's with me.
Okay, so is it possible?
Yeah, I will do that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So the project is being spearheaded and invented by Prime Minister. He has a vision to bring such a city up here, which is very specific in nature. I can't move it. Can you help me? Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, I cannot just move my slide. Is it possible for? Oh.
It's fine now?
Yeah, yeah. It is you who will control it. I thought.
I will control it. I will control. There's some issues. That's why it's.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll just quickly start from cooling is really required for survival of human beings here, and it is necessary for comfort, productivity, and all those things. The main point that I'm picking here is it is a vicious circle. The world needs cooling, and we need to burn fossil fuel to cool further. This fossil fuel again heats up the planet further, and we need more cooling. So it is sort of a vicious circle that we are trapped in. Still, we need to do more and more to see how much we can reduce our carbon footprint. Next. Can you change the slide? Okay, so what we learned here is that in about 15 years from now, I think India would add around 600 million tons by 2034. That's about 750 million by end of 2035. Next. District cooling, everybody knows. My point here is that district cooling is just like any other utility here at Gift City, like electricity, water, gas supply. So we also supply district cooling, and we bill and we provide service to customers just like any other service. Next. So district cooling helps in low infrastructure cost as compared to the conventional water-cooled systems. It lowers the electrical peak, it lowers the freshwater requirement. Next. It is also supposed to be the low customer cost because being an economy of scale, it has a better efficiency and it has low diversity. And besides that, it also helps the developer to free the building space, reduce the capital induction and all that. Next. And then it has a low environmental impact. That is very important. We reduce the overall, the total requirement of the Gift City is around 240,000 tons, where we are going to install only 140,000 tons or 180,000 tons around. So it reduces 45% of the net total capacity installation. That's a big reduction in lowering the CO2 and lowering the ozone depletion and all and such things. And it definitely helps the environmental impact that way. Next. So here is a small example. That's a practical example that, we were supposed to be installing 240,000 tons. We are installing 145,000 tons only. That's because of the diversity. And in this process, we are saving roughly around 50% of the power requirement as a whole when the city will be ready, and around 40% saving on the net capital capacity of the chillers that were required to be installed had it been a conventional water-cooled system. Next. So then I'm trying to introduce a case here as this is a subject given to me. It is somewhat driven by by GIFT's model, although it doesn't replicate the GIFT model. And here what we see is that there are two models that we will use, a greenfield hypothetical example and a retrofit hypothetical example. So considering, let us say, a 10,000 ton plant costing around 100 crores with a year-on-year increase of 20% of the cooling load, we expect that the break-even on the OPEX should be there in around 5 to 6 years' time. And the overall total OPEX break-even should arrive at around 7 years' time from the time of the start. That's like roughly when the system would be loaded to over about 50% to 60% of the total load capacity, that operational total load capacity. And am I audible?
Yeah, Mr. Jim, the time is up. You have
okay. That's good. So, well, the subjects are bigger, and I'll just quickly close this up saying that, you know, a net profit can be generated in around 13 to 25 years. So this district cooling systems are not for small players. They are for the larger players who are supposed to be remaining in the business for around 30 years plus. That's how I can end this for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajev, for that input and sharing your experience on the gift city and on district cooling and the benefit that it gives to the city as a whole. I think it's interesting to see that you mentioned that cooling is a utility as can be compared to other utilities such as the power utilities or water utilities. So I think that's something to bring with the future. I think district cooling markets benefit if there are district cooling utilities available in the market. Okay, thank you very much. I will move to the next speaker, Mr. Teruhisa Oy, who is a principal energy specialist from ADB. Welcome, Teru. Are you here? Do you have a slide that you want to share?
No, I don't have any slides. But,
okay.
Can you see me?
Sorry?
My video is on. My video is on.
Yes, we can see you.
Oh, okay.
So maybe you can describe how ADB is working on public and private projects in India, and how do you see the district cooling market potential in India?
Well, sure. Thank you very much for inviting me for this webinar. And I've been working for ADB last 17 years. Out of that, I've been working for China, Mongolia, particularly district cooling projects. In the past 13 years in China, and then now moved to the South Asia market, and then particularly looking at India and Bangladesh. Well, needless to say, what everybody said, that there is a great potential on district cooling in India. So that's why I partner with APUEA to facilitate the market India. So that's the first thing. And I actually experienced in China that there is a growing or huge market in district cooling. So that also trend, also not only in China, also Japan and Singapore. Japan is a country that I'm from, and Japan also having a large district cooling market. And needless to say, all the benefits coming from district cooling is important in terms of the climate change actions, and also the how to reduce the urban heat, and knowing that urbanization is unstoppable, and we have to think about how to manage the urban energy system as a whole. So I think a previous discussion that whether it's a power system or whatever energy system has to be centralized or decentralized, I would say that the both has to be there. Because these two will be complement each other, and one way of, especially the distributed energy system, that will reduce the transmission and the distribution losses of both hot water, cold water, and even the electricity. So my experience in China, the tri-generation in the municipal level is quite energy efficient. And I think this type of model also should be promoted in India. I think a previous speaker talks about that basically the profit return is coming around 13 to 23 years. I think that that's something that the ADB as a regional financial institution can help, because our repayment period of the sovereign guarantee loan is 25 years, and we also provide a 5 years grace period. When it comes to the direct financing to the private sector, it also have probably 13 or 14 years repayment period to the project developer, which I don't think that the local commercial banks can provide that length of the repayment. And how ADB can participate or help on this cooling, I think everybody talks about the business model. I think that is one of the key things for us. If the sovereign loan should be provided to support the sovereign guarantee project to the district cooling project, we need some sort of having a public entity involved in the projects. Such as local distribution companies or smart city corporation or municipal corporation. And that is very, very important. And also when we do that, when we assess the project feasibility, I guess it goes both for the private sector and then public sector led district cooling. As a financial institution, we want to make sure that there is a good financial rate of return of the project. So how it comes from is, of course, that how much the cooling are going to be purchased by the buildings and the volume, and another is what is the tariff per quantity. So I think in absence of the tariff regulations for district cooling, I think setting up such benchmark, or starting from an existing district cooling system in India, showing that this is kind of benchmark, so that the local authority can start think of that setting the tariff. It could be possible. I will keep it very short, but all in all, ADB is very much interested in promoting district cooling system in India, and also partnering with other institutions, our partners on other loan activities like the ESL. Definitely, we want to contribute on to the regulation part to the Ministry of Power and other ministries. And of course, the UNEP who open up this market. So with this, I will finish my sort of presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Teru, for your insights there on different financing solutions that ADB can provide in terms of district cooling in India. I think one key takeaway there is important to have local involvement. I think that's something that seems very important when it comes to these kind of projects. Okay, so I'm going to move ahead to the next speaker, who is Mr. Ganesh Das, who is the head of innovation for research and development at Tata Power. Hello, Ganesh.
Thank you. Thank you, and very interesting. We are still in the early stages of learning and understanding that how this entire thing is going to work out. But nevertheless, there has been certain discussions. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, you can see it now.
Yeah. Okay. So as I mentioned, it is a very early stage for us. We have had few discussions, and then we are trying to really understand how the utility is going to come and play a role. So this essentially is from the utility perspective, that how do we really see the entire how this fits into the entire ecosystem and the business model from the utility perspective. And as you would know that one of the things which really troubles the utility is how to manage the peak demand, and then India has extreme weathers, for instance, if you look at the northern part of India where we are based in Delhi, so we have a situation where the summer goes to something like 45, 47 degrees centigrade and maintains, and it's a very sustained heat which we have. When you come to the months of June, July, August, September, you have a very extensive humidity coming in, and then puts a lot of load on the air conditioning system. And if you have the winters, then the winters will get into 0 degrees centigrade. So the challenge is how do you really manage the peak at the same time when you are investing on different assets to really kind of set off one kind of weather, and it becomes standard when the weather gets into the other extreme. So what is that? How do we really manage the peak? What could be the various energy efficiency measures for us? What could be really be used for as an integrated approach to the distributed energy system management system? That is, you're using storage, solar, district cooling, demand response, electric vehicle, all put together. How does it really fit into the grid? And then end of the day, how does it creates a value for the society in terms of this thing? And if you look at the benefit, definitely, there is a very strong element with respect to the resilience, which we feel is important for us to look at, essentially for reducing the stress at the grid. And as we have seen the presentation from the GIFT, Mr. Sharma, that it can have a potential to reduce the power by 50% almost. And then from the economic point of view, there's a cost, and then of course there is an environmental benefit at the national level. And from the customer side, obviously there is going to be improvement in reliability. You are going to have a situation where the maintenance of the system is not going to be for each and individual system, wherein we struggle to run around the AMCs for every equipment. We are looking to see that how a large system can be managed, how a large system can be maintained, and we could get more expertise and kind of a more formal arrangement for maintaining the system, rather than getting a very local support which may not be very competent to look after that. So that is something which talks about the improvement part. And then from the economic point of view, if you look at the real estate cost in India, and if you look at the real estate cost in Delhi, you will find the real estate cost is as high as any of the best cities in the world. It is very expensive to own land here. So we are talking about how to really make use of the land in a better way. When you are creating an office, how can you use that office space very optimally? How can we use the industries space to really use it to the optimum level? So that is where it has its role to play. And of course, apart from the energy saving and the kind of carbon generation it has around that. And then the health benefits, these challenges on pollution. Then what we have doing is when you are putting on a consistent one system, you have a control over the emissions, you have the control over the specifications, you have a control over the standardization. So therefore it is quite a kind of win-win situation for all. But therefore, if you typically look at, we have heard that from the advocacy standpoint, and we also heard ADB speak about there are no regulations largely running on the space. That is true with a lot of new areas in India. Storage is in a nascent stage of developing regulatory kind of framework. Demand response is still to find its feet when it comes to the regulatory kind of framework. Electric vehicle is slowly maturing, and somewhere the demand is forcing or kind of speeding up the entire thing to do. So therefore, policy advocacy in terms of how do you really arrange the finances, that part also ADB has mentioned some of the thoughts there. And how do we use the asset? Is it going to be a part of the local government? Is it going to be a part of the private or the districts? Who is going to be the owner of that? Who is going to maintain that? So those kind of dynamics and logistics need to be looked at. And can we integrate the renewables also to the district cooling system so that it becomes really a kind of a sustainable circle we are talking about? It really promotes a circular economy from that perspective. A technical standpoint, of course, peak demand assessment, customer engagement, assessment of different technology options, those are the things which will come in the moment you are trying to get in. What could be the time of use tariff at different point in time? How can we encourage this to happen? How can we really look at the kind of behavior pattern and the usage, and how can we really work around that? That is something which need to use. And what is the kind of strategy we need to do with respect to the cities which are already planned and which is growing not in a very planned manner. And just to clarify that, as in every countries and state, India also has a very good planning system. But sometimes what happens is, once the city is built, the expansion and the population and the exodus of people from the villages to the cities really push the planning to the edge, and then we have the compromise of something like unauthorized constructions, etc. From the financial standpoint, what is the open access, what are the tax implications, etc. Sorry, yeah. So and the commercial model, what could be an capex model, opex model, what are the business model, partnership, etc. And we have looked at some of the return on investment, and what we feel is, if you look at the return of investment and if you really want to reduce the risk to some extent, it is important to have an hybrid model and maybe get the private parties also engaged. So that is where we feel the kind of investment which is required, the kind of partnership which is required with respect to the land ownership and the infrastructure development which needs to be done with the help of the district. So we also looked at some of the business model which will be very optimal, and we also looked at what could be the use case for utilities if we decide to do that. And we have taken the situation here in Delhi, but of course we have got other utilities in Odisha and in other places. So we looked at the what kind of a storage, what kind of a residential customers participation we could be doing. Like for instance, in India we have a formula wherein the diesel gensets are provided as a backup. So can the district cooling be provided as a part of the design of the house? Those are the things we could look at. And we have looked at some of the business cases in terms of how return of investment.
Time is running out, so maybe you can wrap up.
Yeah, I'll just wrap up. So we just looked at what are the different return of investment models, how the metering has to be done, similar to what could be the advocacy elements also we need to bring in. And then potentially we see a very strong opportunity to integrate with the smart cities project, and how we do it is to be worked out. So I've completed my discussion. We'll be happy to take further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ganesh, for giving your insights in how you are working on district cooling and sharing the key benefits and also the key challenges and opportunities for district cooling in India. We'll move ahead to the next speaker, who is Mr. Dimitri Bojkalov, who is Director of Carrier in India. Go ahead, Mr. Dimitri. You have 6 minutes as well. Do you have a presentation?
Yep. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate the invite. And I do have a brief presentation, not a detailed one. We'll try and wrap it up within the time duration you have given to me. How do I upload the...
should I share your screen?
Yeah, please do. Please do. Please do.
Okay. It's fine now?
Yep, I can see that.
Okay.
Just make it in the presentation mode, that's all.
It's in PDF actually, I cannot do it in the presentation mode.
Just click the right and can't do that. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. So thank you for the invite once again, and appreciate the content. What my fellow panelists have shared is quite exhaustive and of course relevant. You may find few things getting repetitive. I'll try as much to avoid that, and I'll try and put some more points to it. To begin with, touching upon a little bit around the global mega trends, how we look at what's changing across the world, what's changing globally, and then we look at how India is changing with respect to that, and then try and relate to where does we fit in, or where does this district cooling as a concept fit into the applications piece. So we would have observed in the last few years the urbanization move. If I may just touch upon the data piece, is we may be seeing a lot of people moving towards the cities, and that's what is causing the urbanization to happen. And this is not just prevalent in India, but we see a lot of that happening across the globe as well. But to touch upon India figures, what we see today is about 31% of population is living in cities, and this is expected to go up to about 40% in next 10 years. So that's the kind of urbanization is expected in India. Of course, a lot of opportunity lies ahead for us when we look at the existing stock of buildings, which is modernization of the existing systems. A lot of emphasis being given to life safety measures, security of our citizens. Of course, another piece of input, what is important for us to look at from the current context is we have agencies like BEE and EESL who are putting a lot of emphasis and focus and giving us support through labeling program standards, etc., on the efficiency front. And also we have, as India, commitment towards the environment, if we just touch upon the Kigali Agreement piece. So a lot of things happening, a situation which is dynamic, very encouraging. And finally, to touch upon that, we have the regulatory changes also happening across to tie up all the developments which are happening on the technology front. They get related to what is required on field, what is expected as a development to happen in next 10 to 20 years. And that's where we are moving into a regulatory phase as well, which helps us in having developmental work being done in a directed manner. So that sums up on this slide. So maybe we can move on to the next one. So now looking at the growth engines, what we have from India perspective, what we saw in the previous slide was what's happening globally. In India, fellow speakers touched upon the smart cities development, which is happening. As of now, we see not as much speed over there, but whatever is happening, particularly if I touch upon a few names like Dholera, etc. So what we see over there is all these cities will come up with facilities and services which are going to be smart. That means connected services is what is going to happen. We see a lot of development across applications and segments like hospitals. We see a lot of expansion happening around AIIMS hospitals coming up in various cities. Educational institution, government has a lot of focus around educational institutions, and that is contributing toward expansion of the existing cities and getting into the new cities as well. At the same time, there's another area which we see expansion happening is almost 30 to 40 cities at the moment have got metros either running or in the planning stage or development stage or the design stage. So that's another area which we see as the developmental options. Pandemic has shown us the way to work remotely. All of us today are sitting at our own homes or offices respectively and speaking to each other. That's the power of digitalization, if I may say so. And that has given a lot of movement to data centers. The kind of growth what we are going to see in data centers is going to be enormous. When I say enormous, the next 10 years, we will see double the current installed base of data centers. That's what the data says as far as one of the latest JLL report, which I referred to, was going through it. Of course, fellow panelists also spoke about the industrial parks on the pharma side, which are being encouraged and promoted by government. Finally, we do have the industrial corridors, which are coming up in various parts of the country. So all these things give us an opportunity to look at where are we moving towards the opportunity piece. Next slide, please. So if you look at this energy Pareto, it clearly shows the energy consumption, where it is moving and where it has moved from X to a Y2 in terms of next 10 to 20 years. So we clearly see that the space cooling in buildings is going to consume a lot of energy in times to come. We need to look at optimizing the demand. We need to look at optimizing and controlling the energy consumption. And of course, we need to look at the energy efficient systems and products. What also has brought forward is looking at the occupant wellness when we design the new buildings. So there we'd have to put in and feed in more of fresh air purification systems, which puts additional pressure on air conditioning systems. And we have to have a balance between increased load conditions and balancing act between how we are designing our systems. Of course, again, on the sustainability front, we've got regulatory framework being managed by BEE and EESL. A lot of green buildings coming up, footprint is going up significantly, and that's what helps us as India. Next one, please. Next slide. A typical district cooling setup. I don't want to spend too much of time on this. This is how it looks like: multiple buildings, multiple installations, and then we are trying to tie up all these facilities all these infrastructure to one central building where the central plant lies, and it distributes the chilled water system to all these buildings. We can go to the next slide. What is important out here to be seen is that, how does it benefit various stakeholders when we look at the district cooling as a system? A developer, reduced construction cost, of course, reduced power infrastructure cost, elimination of air conditioning of plant, and thus frees up the space, what he's intend to do, reallocate his resources, which are otherwise taking time in various other. I'll wind up in 1 minute. Just give me a minute. I'll just close it up. System reliability certainly goes up. 24/7 maintenance is what comes in. Zero downtime because you've got the 24/7 maintenance over there. We've got an option of thermal storage, which we spoke about and saw from the system, what we already have with us in the gift city. So this is on the system reliability. Looking at tenant, a tenant looks at comfort level, comfort indoors in terms of managing temperatures and controls, comfort on the maintenance side, which he gets. Socioeconomic benefits we already spoke about, so I would not spend much of a time on this. Next one, please. What is important to be seen is when we look at the complete central plant, the district cooling system, it gives us a benefit on demand side also and efficiency side also. What today we have on the technology side is put the plant system manager, which makes all the system inside a chilled water plant room speak to each other to run on an optimized kilowatt per ton as an efficient system at any given load across seasons, across the day. So that helps us in managing our system efficiently further. So this plant system manager helps us in improving the system efficiency by further 10 to 15%, which we already have optimized through a district cooling plant. What it also gives us is visualization. You can have a remote visualization. You can look at the benchmark on efficiency. You can have diagnostics, and you can go to the prognostics level. And you can have a sustainable system which gives you an improved efficiency over a long period of time. That means years and years. As one of the fellow panelists said, the life of the system is close to about 25 to 30 years. Next one, please. So that very much brings me to the end. If we look at how do I summarize, optimize size, we can look at application and then decide what size fits in for this kind of an application. Reduction in cooling load, space saving inside the buildings. A developer can use the building otherwise. Reduction in connected, that is the demand side of it, load. Lower CO2 footprint, lower maintenance cost, and of course the improved downtime. Finally, what is important for us as a country today is we have an improved work productivity. A workforce can deliver what they're expected to deliver with much more productivity. That very much brings me to the end of my presentation, what I had to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dhirai, for that and for giving the insight in the global trends. And also, I think one key takeaway here is how digitalization is one key part of how district energy and district cooling can create benefits for cooling systems. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I'll move ahead to the next speaker, that is Lakshmi Rao from IDA. Hi, Lakshmi. Lakshmi, are you there?
I think my screen just disappeared. I'm back. So let's share my screen. Sorry. Is it?
Right.
So as I'm doing this, I just wanted to make a quick comment on the tariffs. District cooling is very local. Costs are local. Climate is local. Labor costs are local. So the cost of service will be quite local. And so you have to be very careful about centralizing the benchmarking of such rates, especially if you want to get proper returns for local people. But the one thing I also wanted to mention is if you wanted to move from unitary to central district cooling, you have to make sure that the tariff for the window unit, the differential between that and district cooling is sufficient for people to switch over. So those are a couple of comments that I wanted to make. So are you seeing the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, I will skip over a lot of things. Mr. Oy from ADB said, it's the bank that'll give you the money. So our business models really, why do we need a business model? It's so we can show that our project is bankable. It's the thing we'll take in the briefcase to Mr. Oy. And when you open it up, he says, you know, I think I will give you this money and you have to give it back in 13 years. So it's really, what is a business model? For me, it's really a mix of the technical, not such a big part of it, the financial and the governance, which is how are you going to handle the risk? And the risk actually changes depending on where in the project life cycle it is. Somebody mentioned 50 years, but it all starts with the concept and design and construction, getting customers, and then over time you have to maintain it. So it's really a system with a life of its own. And so we really need to look at risk. Risk is quite important. It's there. You must make an effort to see it and allocate it, because without allocation of risk, the project will fail. And one thing we don't want to have happen is examples of failed projects. And that happens very often when you are not aware of what stage you're in, what are the risks you need to consider. So in the early stages, you have very limited data. And so the risk is quite high. It reduces. You also need less money in the beginning. You know, maybe the government or some grants can help with that. So there is really a correlation between level of risk and where you are. And, you know, one of the things that we need to do, there are some critical success factors for projects that succeed. And the biggest one is risk. You need to make sure you've allocated the risk to a party, and people don't take risk for, you know, for free. You will have to pay them to manage the risk. That's important. Gathering information, you know, I heard the UNEP has done a good job of creating a lot of information that's contextual, but the project itself needs to get information demands. You know, the gentleman from Tata Power said, how do I manage peaks? You know, what are your peaks? How will you charge? Will you have a block rate where you charge for basic consumption and peaks? And who is going to give you the money? And what is the rate of return you expect? And the stakeholders, you know, we call them people, but they really can make or break a system. So I want to say, you know, back to risk, there are many kinds of risk. I won't go over these. The demand risk is significant. You know, you have to make sure that you have signed agreements from your customers before you get going. You can't say we'll build it and they'll come. Successful projects have signed contracts that say when the system comes online, I will have a purchase agreement with your company for the next 5 years or 10 years. And this is what I'm going to buy. And companies like To Breathe are very good at this. You know, they get anchor tenants, but they also get a portfolio of tenants of different types. So that's a significant risk, whether it's greenfield or brownfield. You have to make sure that the revenue stream is coming in, or Mr. Oy will say, you know, not a great loan here. I don't want to go into great detail on business models. You know, there's a whole spectrum starting from the very public, which is the municipal. You know, in Europe, they use it a lot. Many of the cities here have it, to the very private. Then there is a special purpose vehicles, joint ventures, concessions, there's a whole range. But the gentleman from Tata Power wanted to talk a little bit about partnerships with the private sector, but also they can be inter-utility partnerships. You know, this happens in places like Colombia, where the water utility, which knows all about pipes to put water in, not necessarily chilled water yet, but they have pipes, they know how to do pipes, they know about right-of-ways, and if the power utility and the water utility combine, that marriage could result in a chilled water utility. So this is a model. I know it's Empresa Pública Medellín, the Medellín, I think, that does this. So different ways of partnering, but it has to be the thinking along the one trench. You know, who has the expertise already? Somebody who builds a township does not know how to do pipe, but a water utility certainly does. So that's an interesting partner that one can see. I won't go into these. These slides are available. There are obviously pros and cons to every model. You can read through these slides. In the very public, there's a lot more control, but maybe the public sector doesn't have money. Maybe they can, as ADB said, they prefer the public sector. They give them longer terms, especially if they're sovereign backed. So there are the advantages of cheaper money, but then maybe you don't have the capacity or the staff that knows how to do district cooling. So procurement cycles can be longer. There's lots of pros and cons. UNEP has also done a good job with these models describing them. The concession agreement is something NG has done well, you know, where you go in and you operate and manage the system, but you are taking some of the risks on you, but then you also expect that risk to be compensated. The private one, we have quite a few of these in the United States where the private sector puts in all the money. But they know their customers, they know how to market to them, they have purchase agreements that they renew every so many years. They also have a portfolio of customers to balance these peaks. They have diversity. The gentleman from Gift City said, you know, 45% less capacity was installed. So you have to know how to manage your load with your assets so you're not overbuilding, but you're also not underbuilding. So on a very hot day, you know, you're not reliable anymore. I was asked to give a couple of examples. You know, this is from Aarhus in Denmark. This is a public department. You know, they basically did, you know, Denmark is amazing. They serve, some of these cities are serving 90%. US, I don't think it's even in the single digits in terms of penetration. So there's a lot to be learned from Scandinavian countries in terms of how they are expanding the community model to do this district energy type of systems. This one is quite recent from NG. Yeah, you can
running out of time.
About. Yeah, okay, thank you. So that's all I wanted to say. The slides are all available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi, for sharing your thoughts on what is important to think about when development is cooling projects in terms of business models and risk and things like that. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to the next speaker, that is Mr. Jakob Bjerregaard, who is a partner at DevCo and also heading the APUA district cooling group. Jakob, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Do you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Yes. Do you have a presentation?
No, I've just taken some notes and we'll try to follow up on some of the things that have been said throughout the session. So thanks a lot for having us here. It's been extremely interesting. And thanks a lot to Lakshmi for the handover. I'm actually in Denmark. We are working in Aarhus just these weeks to establish district cooling there. So that's also moving ahead. But maybe just a few words about who we are as a country, as a company, DevCo. We are an independent business consulting and development company, and we work primarily in district cooling and have been doing so for 20 years. I think in total we have executed around $10 billion of investments in district cooling. And I think maybe what sets us a little bit apart from some of our competitors and colleagues is that we work with a very holistic view on district cooling. And I think that's also become clear today that it's about more than just the technology. Generally, we work all over the globe. We work in Americas, we work in Europe, we work in Asia, we work in MENA. We work with the UN programs, UNDP, emphasizing the not-in-kind refrigerant phase-out that was also mentioned earlier. We support them in the Caribbean. We work with the UNEP, the District Energy and Cities program, and particularly in Egypt right now on district cooling. In Europe, we are also leading the district cooling group in the European Organization for District Heating and Cooling, Euroheating Power. And then in Asia, we are working with APUA, and we lead the district cooling focus group there. So enough about us. What have we learned and what are we seeing right now? We're seeing that there is definitely a global focus on district cooling as a key in reducing the high GWP refrigerants and as a solution for the growing electricity demand for cooling. It's also a more general trend. District heating is also expanding in almost all markets. But I think one takeaway there is that it's much more complicated to get started with a district heating or cooling network than it is to expanding it. And I think one of the issues could be that when people look at district cooling and also district heating, you know, they see it as a silver bullet. There's so many things that you can tackle with district heating and cooling. You know, you can get a renewable energy supply, you can support the existing utility business, you get more energy efficiency, get the refrigerant phase out, sector coupling. You can use it for combating energy poverty. You get resilience, which was also mentioned earlier, but it's hard to do everything at once. So I think instead of expecting everything from district cooling, what we've learned is that we need to focus on the commercial development and get it off the ground. And then the benefits that comes along, they will come along, but don't put all the requirements on district cooling as a silver bullet from day one. What we also see is that it's a mix of existing utilities that are adding services and developing district cooling, but also more developer-driven local projects that are coming, and also touches back a little bit to what Lakshmi said about the business models. There's a lot of different structures in there, from SPVs to joint ventures, both public and private model, and I think we've seen everything done so far. When we look at district cooling from a development perspective, again, when you start from scratch, it's extremely important to have this balanced development. It touches very much upon the risk management. If you go too far and too quick on the technical part, then you forget the commercial model, you forget the customers, and you might neglect also the whole organizational development that is needed to execute it. We usually say that, you know, you should think big with district cooling, but you should plan small. It's really about ensuring the commercial viability of projects in the first stage, making sure you get the customers on board and that you align the projects with the customers early on. In particular, in new developments, there are there are different milestones that have to be met from the developer perspective, with design freeze and so on. And you have to be ready to work with those timelines to ensure that you can deliver a project that is ready when the new developments needed. So a little bit about getting started nationally with district cooling. Go for the low-hanging fruits. You know, it's about establishing some very good reference projects. We see, of course, it's a lot about airports, hotels, malls, hospitals, the big energy users that are usually clustered together, and where you can get systems up and running. And then it's much more easy to expand from there if you have an operating system. It's not so much about the technology. You know, we've heard a lot about that today, and technology is great, but most of the technologies used are tried and tested. So that's not the problem. We will find the technological solution that is needed for the specific case. It's much more about finding the commercial model and putting that together. A little bit about financing. What we see is that financing is generally available when the contracts are in place. The difficulties are the stages in between the early feasibility and financial close. And that's again a little bit back to the risk issue. It's usually maturing the project in the commercial stage, and then of course if there is a too slow uptake for cooling use, particularly in new developments, where it's good to have a differentiated customer base, so that you know that you have some cooling use. Few words about the framework, and then I'll wrap up. We see that it's definitely a benefit to have some local or national requirements on energy efficiency. It goes for power, heating, and cooling, gives a much more level playing field, and makes it much more easy to implement these solutions. Again, it's also about having access to implementing infrastructure, right-of-ways, and so on. And then seeing if you can support the monetization of these derived benefits from district cooling. So grid management, load shifting, is there a way to monetize that in the projects? That was very quickly what I had to say. Thanks a lot for the time.
Thank you very much, Jacob, for giving your insights in the district cooling. And I think the key takeaway here is that the district cooling is a long-term investment, and It's not a silver bullet that will solve every problems right away from day one. It is basically energy infrastructure, and also go for the low-hanging fruit and think big and plan small. Thank you. So we're going to move ahead to the next speaker, who is Mr. Shubhasish Dey, who is the Director of Climate Policy from the Shakti Foundation.
Thank you, Peter. I would like to thank India's Smart Grid Forum for giving me the opportunity to speak in today's webinar. I believe I'm the last speaker today, and speaking at the back end of a webinar has its own challenges and benefits. After so many learned speakers have already shared their insights.
Sorry, Shubhasish, just a minute. Sorry for interruption. Peter, there is another speaker, Mr. Pramit, will be there after this.
Okay. So I'm not the last, but one but last. So after so many speakers have already shared their insight on the technology and the business model, there is not much I could add, but what I'll try to do is to summarize my takeaways from today's discussion. Shakti as an organization had commissioned certain studies in past in which we tried to understand the feasibility of district energy system in a couple of cities, the cities being Bhubaneswar, Pune, and Coimbatore. What we learned from those exercises, and not talking too much about the technology, which is already mature, but on the business model side, there are enough business model globally. Organizations like NG, Talkia, has been successfully running district cooling models globally, and then we have organizations like DLF, Gift City in India, and maybe EASL in future for running business models. But for understanding, or rather developing a large business model for district cooling system, we need to understand first that the energy system planning at the city level must integrate district cooling as something which is integral to it. This will actually help overcome the demand-related risk as well as the land availability-related risk, which is something which is there with any district cooling system. Similarly, we do appreciate the fact that there has to be certain regulations in place to bring district cooling to a level which is utility scale. As Mr. Sharma has already shared his views that district cooling is somewhere where the investor needs to remain invested for a long haul, nothing lower than 10 years. So there has to be a certain amount of commitment coming from the users that they are also remain committed with the investor who is investing in the district cooling system. So that so there is a requirement of tariff structure, there is a requirement maybe, or even a regulatory commission, so that an appellate tribunal, so that the client who is getting the benefit of a district cooling system today, after 5 years, do not dishonor the contract and go to an individual system, and then what happens to this district cooling system after 5 years. So those kind of things, I believe, needs to be in place initially for larger group of organizations investing in district cooling, and banks, someone beyond ADB. ADB is a developmental bank, IFC is a developmental bank, but when we talk about the commercial banks and NBFCs, their interest in investing in large-scale district cooling system will be created there. There are enough model, as Lakshmi has already shared, that there are enough model which are either electricity utility based or municipality based or private developer based across the globe. So I don't see a lot of challenges in terms of the models which are available, but more in terms of how to integrate district cooling in the energy system modeling of cities, as well as how to have proper regulation in place so that the both the client as well as the service providers' interests are taken care of. So with that, I would like to conclude my remark. I guess I have spoken less than what is allocated and spare the time for my next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shubhashis, for sharing your insights on development of district cooling in India and what should be thought about in terms of business development. There are lots of things to think about for sure. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last speaker, who is Mr. Pramit Gupta from Tabreed. Pramit, the floor is yours.
Sure. Hi, Peter. Good afternoon. Good to meet you again. We spoke last year.
Yes, nice to meet
so
you.
much. Thanks. Thanks, ISGF, for this opportunity and all my fellow colleagues for what has been highlighted so far. I believe much has been spoken, rightly so, on the regulatory, financing, development approach, the rules of the game for managing risk, building up a infra solution. How can this be made more cohesive with the involvement of every stakeholder possible within the larger ambit of things. So I'll use my time to focus on the key business model, the cooling as a service business model, on which the entire district cooling system and the business is delivered mostly. Like we did see Ms. Rao highlighting a couple of business models, the concession structure and the public structure and the private investment structure. So I'll try to highlight one of those, like the private through a cooling as a service business model. So what we primarily do as Tabreed will also be, of key focus here of when we approach the technology and the business model for district cooling system. So we, as one of the largest district cooling utilities globally, we build central cooling plants and the associated chilled water distribution networks. This entirely, like whatever connects to a group of buildings and is much more cheaper than the conventional method can be called as a district cooling. We as a developer, and this has been spoken, much now in detail, in depth in the session today, how to approach things, how to, right size the loads, how to do the planning of the cooling loads, how to be aware about the development, the timeline. So this as a developer, Tabreed, we take care of, at the very starting, at the very planning stage of the project, so that we deploy a system which is very right sized for the development time, and also taking deep diving into all our operational data, the experience that we have across geographies, the data that we have gathered across our 1.4 million tons of contracted cooling load that we deliver year round. So those actually help us in designing, approaching the systems that in a manner which will be fit for purpose for the development master plan. And again, this being local, the geography will decide the size, the investment that will go into the system. And as a developer and as a cooling utility, one of our primary approaches is always to be very agnostic on technology, not be very sure of not be very fixated, I will rather say, on a very particular technology that can work. We try to select the right fit, which a very fit for purpose design, which can directly, for a given geography, for a given location, for the cooling needs, for the demand, the type of end users that will eventually use the air conditioning or the cooling for their meeting their needs, can deliver it in the manner that they are designed to, that they want to do it. So technology selection is something which we are as a utility are very agnostic on, but we always take a systems level view to be very sure of what we are building fits the end users requirements in a very precise manner. Also, while on the technology, like this very blends in with the business model as such, is where we using technology, the incentive to, and we have discussed this much more in detail about the various benefits that district cooling provides, lowering of peak demand, shaving of peak demand, meeting the cooling in an efficient manner. So two of the key primary focus for Tabreed has been over the last decade or so, is to drive technology adoption at scale in all our plants end to end, using adoption of variable frequency drives in all our systems. So we do we meet the demand, we supply the cooling at a very efficient level. And the other very large focus of we as a utility has been to deploy like large scale digitization, AI, Internet of Things within our plants, within our system, so that they, all the systems that talk to each other, we can predict demand, how it will be based on all our operational data. And at the same end, we are incentivized to drive operations at a very unprecedented efficiency levels. So that district cooling as such, and a private utility provider is sort of what we can as deliver into the system. Coming to like how the third aspect of all these operations is to try to make overall system cleaner. So when as a district cooling utility provider, or these systems as such, when they aggregate cooling load, much of the energy sources, rather than procuring it from the grid, can also be outsourced to other cooling sources, because we have the leverage to source large in megawatts of like 10 to 15 megawatts for a 20,000 ton plant. So this gives us the scale to procure clean energy at a at a very competitive rate, and again bring down the cost of cooling for the end users, and in turn also enhance the sustainability of the district cooling systems to many-fold than what can be done at at a household level, or at a building centralized conventional level, that can be done by the developers or the building owners themselves. And at the same time, while cooling, while we use the centrifugal chillers and I'll continue. So a large focus of district cooling technology is on water-cooled centrifugal chillers. So there also the heat rejection sources can be easily tapped on through the gray water available, which again makes the overall system very efficient. The other thing that is not captured here is, as utility, we again try to focus largely on storage, where based on factors like like what kind of peak electricity demand is available, if time of day tariffs are available or not, basis the the peak that the cooling consumption achieves during the daytime. All that things can be easily managed using the energy storage also, which is a very essential part of our system.
Pramit, I think we are running out of time.
Sure. And I'll just finish this quickly, Peter. So, and as a utility, like much has been spoken on this being very bankable. So our overall, the business model is to recover like what we recover. We have been recovering for electricity as well as water through metered tariffs for cooling, metered measured through BTU meters and recovered as per tariff fixed for the local geographical area or the campus that we are serving. And this generally the investment recovery happens at long tenures, as is expected from a utility of any utility, and district cooling utility is no different here.
Thank you very much, Pramit, for sharing your thoughts on cooling as a service business model. And I think what's interesting here, what I see here is also, district cooling really enables the integration of for example, renewable energy, renewable electricity, but also waste heat and things like that. So it's really a way of integrating more renewable energy and also reduce peak loads. So thank you for that, Pramit. I was told that we have time for a few questions. So I would like to ask all panelists, if you have any questions for each other, please go ahead and ask questions. We will have time for about 5 minutes of questions. Maybe you can just raise your hand before, or just open the mic and address the question. And when meanwhile, I can just give a few takeaways then from session 2 here. I think there's a need for cooling utilities similar to water utilities and power utilities. So that will enable more projects for district cooling, and also show more case studies. Basically, there are financial opportunities, and where it should be adapted to local environments, and the business model should also be developed for the local conditions. And also in India, we feel it is important to go for the low-hanging fruits in terms of projects. And I also want to mention that the APUEA, we are hosting the Global District Energy Climate Awards in Bangkok, 11th to 12th of November. So it's a good opportunity to showcase successful district energy projects in Asia Pacific, and it will be a 2-day event showcasing district cooling and district heating in the Asia Pacific region. So you're very welcome to reach out to us if you have an interest to join us in Bangkok in November. Okay, so we have a question here. Dirai?
Yep, that's right. Thanks, Peter. My question is more to the representation we have from EESL at the moment. While we spoke on multiple aspects with respect to policies, etc., my question is EESL right now working on any policy document towards cooling as a service rather than only a district cooling concept, or the cooling as a service? Is there anything in the making or thought process right now? Is my question.
So we have anyone from ESL still here?
I think Peter, he has left. I will request Mr. Ajit Gupta to reply to this question because he will be well aware of this. Mr. Gupta, please, if you are online. I can see him online, but I think yes. Mr. Gupta, please, if you can reply to the, Mr. Diresh's question.
Not sure if he's there.
He doesn't seem to be there.
I'm trying to connect him. You can go ahead with the next question till the time he's there. I think he's there, but he's on mute. I will just try to call him and get him online.
All right. So is there any other question? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question to all of my colleagues, and I just want to draw an analogy from the power sector itself. So I'm wondering, is there any discussions when we talk about district cooling or cooling as a service to separate content from carrier? For example, where you have generators that provide the cooling, you have the distribution that is in the hand of another company, and you have a retail, because it seems to me for the consumer would be left with a choice instead of actually creating other monopolies or other utilities that serve as monopolies on the market.
Do we have anyone who wants to answer that?
Martin, there are some physical constraints, unlike the electric wires, which electrons flow through. We tried this in Cambridge. It's difficult to connect two networks of chilled water or hot water because of the water chemistry, the pressures, the temperatures. Electricity is pretty standardized, 50 hertz or whatever it is. So that's the difficulty. But there are, even in Saudi Arabia, they're thinking of, and they've done it in Copenhagen, having this large network or a grid so you can have generators feeding in, or even data centers, anybody with waste heat can feed in. But I think it's a great idea along with the one trench. We should keep it alive. But there are, maybe if there's cooperation in the early design stages, they can connect easily. But having it has to be planned and designed along many parameters, pressures, temperatures. You know, if I have a medium hot water and you have a low hot water, it's not going to work. Valves. So electricity is so much easier.
Can I just add, I think it is feasible, but it's the larger the country, the more difficult it is. And to give you an example, in France, they've successfully introduced greening of their gas distribution network through incentivizing farmers, for example, to produce biomethane. They encourage people to actually inject gas into the grid, and have therefore been very successful in implementing that. But it takes a huge long-term political effort to be able to implement that.
Yeah, and I'd like to add Sudhir here as well. I mean, Martin, I think that's exactly also what the GCC looked at as a part of the overall evaluation. I mean, at least in the GCC in Dubai, Abu Dhabi specifically, since there are multiple district cooling grids owned by the private sector and the players in the market, the possibility of trying to look at this like electricity in terms of how this can be done. And I think went back into exactly some of the points that were mentioned before this in terms of, I mean, who would be owning the network, who would be actually, will there be a single buyer model, will there be a single network owner model, and then basis multiple generation companies setting up and supplying to the network, that then being procured by maybe a national utility, and then being distributed through someone and so on. But it got too complicated, and it probably, I mean, the industry, even the GCC was mature enough for something like that, right? But yeah, could evolve that way as the grid become larger and planning is done in a more efficient way.
Peter, I think Mr. Gupta is here already. So Dheeraj can throw your question. Peter, you're on mute.
Maybe maybe you can repeat your question again.
Sure, I'll do that, Peter, thanks. My question is, are we looking at any policy towards cooling as a service at the moment? We spoke about policies with respect to district cooling, etc., and many other inputs came. But cooling as a service, are we looking at as we get into more and more cities at a planning stage getting designed with that kind of an approach? Is my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dheeraj ji, for the question. And yes, that's what exactly we are looking at. I mean, how to incorporate cooling as a service in the planning stage of cities or at the planning stage of multi-story buildings, something like that. And that's why I mean, we have given this example of I mean, how we have kind of converted our LPG gas cylinders into PNG. So although, I mean, I'm not kind of saying that these are apple to apple comparison, but there are some similarities which we can draw from the way we converted from LPG cylinders to the PNG. At least now it is very common in the metro cities to begin with. So maybe that is the approach which we are also trying to look forward when we are saying that we will be trying to promote cooling as a service in our country. And we have already kind of started examining the various business models. Of course, there were lots of good and new innovative business models which were discussed today as well. So we are looking at whether we should go it on a hybrid way, like a PPP kind of a partnership, or it can be of only a private owned. Public owned, of course, we are not, I mean, it's just for the sake of argument we are saying, but we know that it won't work, the public owned model. And as the government is more and more looking towards the kind of private based models, so we will be focusing more on the hybrid and the private owned models. And then again, we'll discuss it with all the concerned stakeholders, and then we'll try and come up with a policy which is workable for all. So that's the.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the answer. Just a follow-up question that I hope that you will be having an inclusive approach of involving all the stakeholders also to have their opinion and inputs which can help you in devising a better policy. That's all.
True, of course. I mean, that's the way B has been functioning. Even if you look at our standards and leveling program, I mean, it is an inclusive approach which we have followed. Not only in the standards and leveling program, but also in the PAT program, the Performance Achievement Trade program for the larger industries. There also, I mean, all the stakeholders have been included. So inclusive approach is an integral part of all our schemes. It will be just true for this effort as well. Thank you.
Exactly, and appreciate, because we have been a part of all these programs as an organization. And thank you for the answer. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe we have time for one more question. Otherwise,
hello everyone. Can you hear me? It's Pramod. Yeah, I need to ask one question. See, regarding the migration from the water cooled systems to the air cooled systems, considering the shortage of water in major cities. So if you go migrate to water air cooled systems, there will be an impact on the energy efficiency. So considering this combination, which is the best model we can approach? Or is it hybrid, or any suggestions on this?
Is there someone who wants to answer this question?
So, there is no one answer. In Saudi Arabia, for example, they have very deficient water systems, so they do air cooled. They need large spaces to erect these chillers, whereas in the United States, we do have water, and so we go for the water cooled. And, there is, I think I'm trying to remember who did it. Is it Carrier Johnson? But they have this, I forget the name of, thermosiphon. It's a technology, I won't go into it, you can look it up, which allows you to switch between air and water depending on the controls involved, depending on what the need is, the load is, and all that. But, all of Mecca, Medina, they're all air-cooled, large scale, large tonnage chillers. So there is no one answer, but you will need water. So as somebody said, we need to first reduce demand, so that, there's a lot that needs to be done to reduce the demand for cooling, reduce peaks as much as possible, so that you are not consuming not just water, you will need power as well. You will need substations for these centralized plants. So a lot of planning has to be done. We're not at the business model stage yet. We need to invest a lot more in regional planning, in city planning, energy planning, integrating sectors. So I think we may not talk about it. We're ready to go. We're ready to develop a system and need a business model to go to ADB. That's great. That's a good vision to keep in mind, but without planning, the cost will be much higher. That's my opinion.
Sorry, a follow-up question on this one. Or is it, do you recommend a hybrid system with a combination of air-cooled and water-cooled as well? Or because if you go for air-cooled, you'll have an impact on the efficiency as well.
Yes, it's a trade-off. And it's local, district energy is local. You have to look at your local climate, your local needs, your local water, and some people are using treated sewage effluent. That's another way to mitigate your water resource constraints. So when you say hybrid, you need to design your system for the loads. You may not be able to use water-cooled systems in some locations. So I hope I've answered it. It's a design thing. You have to design your fleet, if you will.
Thank you.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I can mention also, just on your question there, Pramod, I think also what is important when looking into cooling and DC cooling is that you utilize available water resources. It could be, it doesn't have to be a cooling tower to reject heat. It could also be rivers, but also look into treated sewage water, but that's because that is available in cities. So that can be used to dissipate heat, and this is also a very effective way as well. So that's also another comment. I also want to mention here, we got a reply to your question, Martin, from Michael Jacobson, regarding a large district heating network in Stockholm, Sweden. So I think there's a link there in the chat where you can check that out. And Michael has also worked there previously, so feel free to reach out to him as well. Okay, I think we are running quite late, so I think it's time to wrap up the session. But I was told here that before we leave, we should all switch on the cameras, and so that we can take some screenshots of the session. So please turn on the cameras. I don't know who is going to take the screenshot.
No, it's fine. I'm taking it. It's fine.
Okay, so let me know when you're happy.
It's done. It's done. It's done. It's done.
It's done. Okay. Okay. Then I want to thank you all for a very interesting and good discussion on the Recooling, and I hope we can do it soon again. Thank you also to India Smart Grid Forum for inviting us and to be a part of this event. So that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Stay well.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.